Sword of Coming Chapter 838. 11 people from the earthly branches returned to the inn before, and on the two small hills, Yuan Huajing and Song Su didn't even call someone to come over for a review. The teenager Go Kunnel was at ease, anyway. Every time he deduced the evolution of the battle, deliberated on the details, and reviewed the game afterwards, his brain was not enough, and he couldn't talk, so just do it. The Xianjia Inn in Beijing, where there is no name, is a bit similar to the Snail Dojo in the blessed land of Jiang's cloud grottos. The landscape is obscured and overlapped. Maybe the two houses are close to each other, thousands of feet away, and 11 people. Each occupies a secluded courtyard with additional magic. The main house is a white jade dojo similar to the old monk Lu Jia in the alley. It does not seem to be big, but in fact it is worthy of the name. It is selected from the Dali treasury. The secret realm of various broken caves. Go Cun took the hiking stick made of green bamboo and took it for a walk in the courtyard. The female ghost Gayan is a nominal lady of the inn, and she is visiting Han Zhoujin right now. Sui Lin, a 5-element chi practitioner who can reverse a part of the time and flow, is refining that valuable ancient golden body fragment. There is no such high-ranking gold in the secret treasure house built by the Ministry of Justice and the Ministry of Rights. The body fragments are not easy to refining. I put aside the rest of the practice and concentrate on this matter. It still takes a full month of work, but these drafts are not too much for Sui Lin. The little novice monk from the Jingshi Translation Bureau realized that he really ran to a nearby temple to find a merit box and secretly donated money. Yuan Yingjing Jianxiu Yuan Huajing, nicknamed Yilang, was sitting cross-legged on a futon at the moment. There was no decoration in the house, and it looked like a family member on 4 walls. Behind Yuan Huajing sat a row of men and women who looked like attendants. There were 10 men and women in total, but all of them were lifeless, a little bit less popular and spiritual. After returning to the inn, Yuan Huajing only called Song Su and his hard work, no other monks. After the painful hand came here, I felt a little guilty. To be honest, he respected the sword fairy in Qingshan very much. Song Shubi came here a little bit later, took off his boots in the corridor, and then took a position near the door, sat on the floor, glanced at the 10 puppets behind Yuan Huajing. Even if it was a pure sword repairer with such excellent qualifications as Song Su, he was a little envious of Yuan Huajing's unreasonable great fortune. In the early years on the battlefield of Dadu, Yuan Huajing used flying swords to kill 2 UP-level military account monster cultivators. Now these two are sitting behind Yuan Huajing. In addition, there was also a demon clan who was a martial artist in the mountain realm before his death. He was also on the battlefield of Dallas' companion capital. The other 10 people from the Earth branch fully cooperated with Yuan Huajing, and Yuan Huajing finally picked up this head. This is Yuan Huajing's natal flying sword, Yilang's natal supernatural powers. Anyone killed by the flying sword will become a puppet of Yuan Huajing, and even the soul will be detained. It's just that the puppet monks in pure martial arts have suffered a lot of damage, and their intelligence is far less than when they were alive. For example, the 2 Jade Pure Monster monks fell to Yuaning, and the rest of the Yuaning the falling realm is the Golden Pill, and there are also many puppets who are now in the Longmen realm or even the Sevuing realm. After weighing the pros and cons, Yuan Huajing chose to keep it because of their unusual magical powers. Replace them with higher-level Earth Fairy puppets. Otherwise, after the Battle of Banzhou Lushan ends, Yuan Huajing can have 2 wandering martial artists and 8 followers of the Earth Fairy realm. The catch and fight on the mountain, a Yuaning realm sword repairman, cannot stop the Jade Pure realm monk at all, but Yuan Huajing, the Yuaning, is now a Jade Pure other than the sure kill sword repair. Yuan Huajing is like a sword repairer born for war. If he is a native sword repairer of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, he will definitely shine with the magical powers of the flying sword, Yilang. The rank of this sword is sure to be ranked first in the selection of the summer palace. On the way to practice, during the battles of battles, the defenders might be great sword immortals like Yu Qing and Mi Hu. Song Su looked at the Yuan Huajing, who seemed to have nothing at all. He didn't get angry and looked unhappy. He couldn't help calling his name, Yuan Huajing. This is not in compliance with the rules. The Chinese teacher once made a rule for us. Tai Li, only those who live and die with my imperial court, can we let the bitter hands use this magical power. Besides this, even the king of a country, as long as he is selfish, he is not qualified to use it. Our earthly branch kills people by this. This is the real assassin of their dolly earthly branch monks, imaginary enemies, one of a few, Fengshui Temple Great Sword Immortal Wei and Jin, God Sect Tianjun Qi Zhen, the current sovereign of the True Realm Sect, the Fairy Realm Monk Lu Laoqing, and Piyun Mountain Weibo, Zhongyue Mountain Jun Jin Qing. In fact, Song Su still had nothing to say. After painstakingly sacrifice this magical power, life will be greatly reduced. There has been an assessment before that in his life, he can only use it 3 times. Under the Yupu realm, there is only one chance, otherwise he would not be able to enter the 5 realms in this life. Yuan Huajing said indifferently, the national teacher who made the rules for us is no longer there. Song Su clenched his fists with both hands, propped on his knees, his eyes were cold, and he said solemnly, Yuan Huajing. Yuan Huajing said, I think this Chen Pingan is a potential enemy of our dolly, and his threat is definitely greater than the idle clouds and wild cranes like Wei Jin, Qi Zhen, and Lu Laoqing. Just as Song Su was about to refute, Yuan Huajing glanced at the golden branch and jade leaf of the Song family, who was born in Tianhuang nobleman, and continued, His Royal Highness, I admit that Chen Pingan is a very disciplined person, and the rules are almost like a mountain man. Yes, but Song Su, don't forget, sometimes, good people do good deeds, they also violate the law of dolly. If we don't have the key to victory over Chen Pingan and Luopashan, it's a huge hidden danger. We can't wait until that day has come, and come back to make up for it. It seems that he alone will make the rules for the entire dolly court. He will kill whoever he wants to kill. In the final analysis, it is still the 10 of you who practice too slowly, and Chen Pingan is too fast. The female ghost Gain is a mountain painter profiler on the mountain. She is now in the Golden Core realm and can already make Chen Ping's vision deviate. When she enters the upper 5 realms, she can even make people, seeing is believing. In addition, Gain has a more concealed identity, she is the corpse who is proficient in color alchemy and can create a romantic account. Lu Hui, who was born as a Confucian Qi trainer, is a true master of the Great Path, but he is a one-character teacher, who is disgusted by Yujing in the Qingming world. The 5 elementist Sui Lin was able to reverse the time and flow in Zio Oceandi, and teamed up with the Buddhist, meditation, supernatural powers realized by the little novices, coupled with the formation of Han Zhoujin and others, can work together seamlessly, allowing the earthly branch to occupy the best time and place. Rinha, if it weren't for the young hidden official who had been used to the long river of time, his mind and body could be as a mainstay, as if he could completely let the slender water of time flow from both sides, and it was even flying before. The sword directly cut off the time and flowing water, otherwise it would be inexplicable to change to a normal jade pure realm cultivator. Hard-handed is a mirror seller of the legendary 10 bandit candidates. This kind of monks with extraordinary talents is extremely rare in Howren. One of the most fundamental zombies of the hard-handed is a water-stopping state, with talented supernatural powers, profound and mysterious. In one sentence, either one is the other, the imaginary state is the real state. Song Su stared at Yuan Huajing, you really have no selfishness. Yuan Huajing shook his head, I dare not have. If you accidentally cross a certain bottom line, you will definitely be targeted by that guy. Jingyang Mountain is a lesson from the past. Regarding the ceremony on the Luopa mountain to observe the Xingyang mountain and the joint questioning of the sword between Qin Pingan and Lu Xianyang, the 11 people of the earthly branch had their own opinions, and they all respected and admired the hidden official's methods. Yuan Huajing's view is different from everyone else. What he fears most is not Qin Pingan's swordsmanship and boxing, not the multiple identities, or even Chen Ping's dismantling of Xingyang Mountain series of details, swordsmanship and words. Combined vertically and horizontally, divided and transformed, each defeated. It was Chen Ping's forbearance that was different from ordinary people. It's like a resentment that has become deadlocked. Someone who has a bitter heart may have a 50% chance of winning, so he can't help but make a move. Some people have an 80% chance of winning, they will definitely give it a try. More people, if they have a 10% chance of winning, are fools if they don't make a move. But Qin Pingan is different. It seems that even if he has a 12% chance of winning, he is still in a hurry, the layout is calm, interlocking, and everything is correct. Therefore, in this shot, Yuan Huajing did not tell anyone in advance except Song Su and Su Ho. Yu Yu and Sui Lin were kept in the dark. Yuan Huajing was afraid of being detected by the hidden official of the city government. Fell short of success. Song Su asked a key question, how does Qin Pingan deal with? Yuan Huajing glanced bitterly and smiled. Of course it is to make the best use of everything, help us practice repeatedly, and practice until we can steadily beat Qin Pingan. What Qin Pingan has learned is simply the best whetstone, swordsmanship, boxing, talisman, a lot of zombies, plus this person's scheming, calculation. If 11 people can beat Qin Pingan, it means they are fully qualified to kill an immortal. Although the 11 were all cheap practitioners, in addition to Song Changjing who occasionally taught them a few times of boxing, there is also a martial arts instructor who specializes in teaching martial arts. His realm is not high, he is only in the remote travel state, but he was born in the Dali Frontier Army, so the teaching skills are nothing more than straightforward, fierce and decisive. Yuan Huajing seemed to think of an interesting thing, half-jokingly said, a martial arts master who can fight with Chao Ci back and forth, and a master of martial arts who can hold the countless fists of Xingyang Mountain Yuan Jinye. From today onwards, we can help us feed our fists anytime, anywhere, and temper our physical fitness. Such an opportunity is really rare. Even if we are not pure martial arts, the benefits are not small. If that woman martial artist Zhou Haijing can eventually become our comrades, she will surely laugh at such a huge surprise. Song Su continued to ask, then. Yuan Huajing said, then. Can there be any other then? Isn't it a very simple thing? In the end, let me slay the hermit. Song Su shook his head and said, absolutely can't do it like this. The painful hand is not high now, and there is no experience to learn from in the process of refining the mirror. It is the first time that the painful hand is involved in this matter. An accident happened. Since the national teacher established a rule with us for this purpose and did not allow us to use it casually, it must have known the seriousness of the matter early. He tentatively said, I want to maintain this mirrored reality. Actually, it consumes the gods' money every day. It's not as good as if we can really win that hermit one day, let him be in my mirror world. Falling apart. Song Su nodded, this matter is feasible, so we don't have to do anything wrong. Yuan Huajing shook his head and smiled and said, I am not stupid. Of course I will cut off all the thoughts and memories of Qin Pingan. I will not keep a little bit. The only ones who will stay by my side are the nascent soul realm sword cultivator and the mountain peak realm. Takeo's empty air. And I can assure you that it's not a last resort and will never let this person emerge. Unless our earthly branch is in a desperate situation, we will let him take action as a fairy hand to help turn the situation around. In an instant. In the midst of suffering, he heard a warm and mellow voice that was unexpected to death, and it spread from the lake of his own heart, in the stagnant water realm of his life, which made his face pale with horror. Just listen to someone smiling and saying, "Turn the situation. Satisfy you." The painstaking hand instantly converges the consciousness, stabilizes the Taoist heart, and turns into a grain of mind, and wants to check the ancient mirror of the life. I didn't think that I suddenly felt unstable and vomited blood. I stretched out my hand to cover my heart and tried my best to stop something, but the water still opened the heart of the painful hand by itself and fell to the ground. Ancient mirror on the reverse side, there is a circle of ancient seal inscriptions, palindrome poems, human heart is square inch, Tianqin Abbot, what I see, the mountains turn and the water stops, view the realm with humans, and the existence of emptiness and reality. Raising one hand with a painful hand, he must hold down the ancient mirror like a rebellion. The ancient mirror turned over, the mirror's surface was facing upwards, bursting with a dazzling light, jumping out of the sea like the sun, flew out with a hard hand, slumped against the wall. The person in the mirror is a young man wearing a snow-white robe, with a sword on his back and his face blurred. It is faintly visible that there is a dark hairpin on his head, a string of snow-white beads in his hand, and his bare feet without shoes. He smiles lightly. He sighed lightly, then raised his hand and gently wiped the mirror surface. Then the mirror opened the door, instantly full of sword energy. The white-robed man with the sword back, after stepping out, the original mustard-sized figure in the mirror is no different from ordinary people, with a slender figure, a pair of golden eyes, and the hand holding the Buddha beads, bears behind him. Spread the palm of his left hand, lay it horizontally in front of him, 5 thunderstorms. He stood in the house, calmly, smiled and said, "Blessings and evils have no way, but people call themselves. The retribution of good and evil is like a shadow." He stomped lightly, and the whole and was in the small world of the bird in the natal flying sword cage. The sergeant hears the Tao and walks diligently. To ask the heart, that is, to go to the mountain to visit the immortals, and suddenly meet a quiet person, like the Tao Xan. This Chen Ping'an turned his head to look at the bitter hand sitting against the wall, and smiled, the ancient mirror on the ground, dragged by a ray of true energy, fast as a flying sword, directly nailed into the heart of the young monk. "I'll give it back to you, and remember to collect it later, if there is any later." The painstakingly kept his heart orifice blown to pieces by his own destiny, his neck seemed to be grabbed and pulled out to an exaggerated extent, his limbs twisted involuntarily, and every inch was broken. A monk's golden pill was forcibly taken out of the small world, just hovering in front of the painful eyes. And in Chen Ping'an's vision, the 2 flying swords of Yuan Huajing and Song Su, after being sacrificed, seemed to fly slowly in the air, so slow that even a patient such as him felt that it was too much. Slow. He walked slowly, turned sideways, past Song Zu's golden light overflowing natal flying sword, and then came to Yuan Huajing's flying sword, Yilong, letting the flying sword move little by little. "Move by yourself." He just squinted at the flying sword and snapped his fingers. The houses and buildings were all gone, just like the world, everything and colors were swept away, and the insignificant white-drawn scrolls were removed, leaving only the heart. 11 painted figures in the picture scroll. Outside this room, there were 8 monks with 1 branch of the earth, and they came to this place at the same time. Everyone still maintained their previous posture. After the young man Go Cun finished his walk, he returned to the house and placed the green bamboo stick horizontally. Ni, looking at the inscription, Ji Yuan. The female ghost Gain was smiling and talking with Han Zhoujin. Han Zijin's expression was slightly absent. The little novice monk had just returned to the inn afterwards, walking on the road and was raising her foot. Yu Yu bowed her head, leaning forward, as if she was counting something. Sui Lin was still sitting cross-legged, refining the fragments of the god's golden body. Dao Lu Gelying held a book turning pages. He bends his index finger, flicks his thumb, and a chess piece emerges, throws it high, and slowly falls to the ground. After the sound of entering the water, a chessboard appears between the world and the earth. Then slowly approached Yuan Huajing's flying sword. Yilong twisted his fingers, turned the tip of the sword, walked to Yuan Huajing's side, pulled it gently, nailed it into the center of the latter's eyebrows. Fai Jianjian pointed directly through Yuan Huajing's head. He squinted Yuan Huajing's eyes, smiled and shook his head, and commented, "Isn't it a pure martial arts, paper-like body?" The 8th guest monks who came back to their senses in an instant have discovered the tragic situation of dying and suffering. Yu Yu immediately sacrificed the young sword fairy, bent his knees slightly, and rushed forward in an instant, rising to the sky, like a cage, blocking her path. Fortunately, the sword immortal attendant kept firing his sword and forcibly cut away the straight lines of sword light. Yu Yu had no distracting thoughts. She is a military cultivator and must be held back. This inexplicable Qin Pingon came to trouble them for a while before he had a chance to fight back. He smiled and looked at the little girl of the soldier monk. Can he not die if he is not afraid of death? Come to me, can you find it? Out of the corner of his eye, he caught a glimpse of the young sword fairy who kept a little bit of true spirit and the sword fairy skin. Split it apart and cut it in two. She seems to be hitting the wall all the time. Yu Yu, who was already less than 10 meters away from the person, appeared in a trance, but then no matter how she rushed forward, or even swept backwards, drawing arcs and flying. In short, she couldn't pull the distance between the two sides. Close to within 10 feet. The world is turned upside down, and Yu Ye's path is everywhere turned into an unbelievable situation by that person. Dela Gelying sacrificed a ridge-moving technique, smashing into the snow-white figure from all directions. Just a large mountain and huge ridge, all in the air, were cut and fell on the ground by a slender sword light, and fell on the chessboard. Above it, it becomes nothingness. He suddenly appeared beside Yu Yu, holding her face door with one hand. Yu Ye's body crashed to the ground, but all the souls were ripped out by this person. He shook his head and said, "I have been in the cage for a long time, and I will return to nature. It's me, not you." Looking at Yu Ye's detained soul, his pure golden eyes, golden light faintly flowed. "The world is empty, you are just those dispensable household dust." Between the words, my mind moved slightly, and the two words silently read, "Flowers bloom." Lu Hui, a Confucian Qi training man, was nailed into his body with dozens of long swords, and he couldn't move, as if a bunch of blood blossoms suddenly appeared on the spot. The ghost modified the whole person's ghost body, which was divided by countless crisscross sword lights, including people with dresses, robes, and golden crow armor on the spot. The man smiled and said, "This hand of his own swordsmanship has just been named Pianyue." Young ghost Cun was cut off with both hands and legs. Taoist Gelying was wrapped in hundreds of talisman within a prescription of the chessboard. The man came out behind Sui Lin, locking the sword talisman. "It doesn't mean much, don't forget that I am still a pure martial artist." After a punch, he pierced through the back of the five-element practitioner. Song's natal flying sword was pressed against the tip and hilt of the sword by the man's two fingers. He shook his wrist lightly, and condensed a long spear with sword energy in his hand, and pierced that character master Lu Hui from his neck, bursting out a cloud of Wu Fu Gang Qi, and raised the latter with the tip of the spear. He seemed to be muttering to himself, "How?" In the next moment, a blue shirt appeared on the side of Qin Pingan, in his snow-white robe, standing with his back facing each other, as if the two sides would pass by in the next moment. Without turning his head, he smiled and said, "If you have an extra knight sword, you can take advantage. Fortunately, I have an extra caged bird and it's even." He sacrificed the two caged sparrows first, and got the first move. The latter's self, the caged sparrows could only be outside. In fact, it is no more. Chen Pingan said, "You can stop." He raised his head slightly and looked at the poor monk who was hung in the air by the spear in his hand. "We haven't seen you in a long time." Chen Pingan said, "I don't think so." The Chen Pingan around him, in a sense, is like a heart demon that should have appeared in the bottleneck of the nascent soul realm. Now it has been late, but it is more like a demon who has abandoned all humanity. I have to admit that he is more like a pure sword repairman than Chen Pingan. A small world of birds in a cage, densely covered with sword spirit, thousands of miles of mountains and rivers, without any painted scene, the world is like snow for thousands of years. He looked at that Yuan Huajing and said with a smile, "Is it fun, just like a person, consciously not doing anything wrong, not afraid of ghosts knocking on the door, but there will be a knock on the door immediately. Then he swears, if there is a violation of conscience, God 5 thunders and thunders, if coincidentally, there will be bursts of thunder." Isn't this another kind of sincerity in spirit? 3 feet above the head, there is still a God. Above Yuan Huajing's head, a mighty thunderbolt crashed down, but it was hit by another thunderbolt that seemed to rise from the bottom of the earth, just collided. He sighed, "This is very sad." For example, some of his plans, stealing Yuan Huajing's spirits, and temporarily opposing the guest, there are 10 more puppets controlled by him at will. There can be many hidden means like this. But Chen Pingan could guess and know. I are struggling each other. Or he came too quickly, otherwise he could slowly refine the 11 Dali, which is equivalent to one person filling the 12 earthly branches. During this period, all the magical powers and spells of the 11 other earthly branches could be dismantled, learned, and mastered one by him, and finally all turned into his own use. But it doesn't matter, there is no good thing in the world to take advantage of it. He smiled and asked, "Our husband likes to put his hands together when he meets a monk. In that Taoist temple, he fights with others. Will this affect Mr. Chi's mentality when he was young?" Chen Pingan nodded and said, "Yes." He asked again, "Then why didn't you tell Pei Qian the matter?" She got the gift from the female sword fairy Zhou Qing, so Zhou Qing went on the battlefield with no regrets. It's a good thing, why can't it be a big deal? Maybe Pei Qian's entry into the nascent soul realm sword cultivation will be much faster and it will only be more stable. Chen Pingan smiled and said, "I found out that I was chatting with people. It turned out to be really annoying." He put away the spear in his hand, and Lu Hui, who was picked up in the air, fell to the ground, dying, lying in a pool of blood. Song Su looked at the feeling that seemed to be the only one relatively safe and sound, and despaired. If the other Chen Pingan chooses to be the first to kill this little novice from the translation bureau, it means there is still room for maneuver. Because after Sui Lin reversed the flow of time for a short period of time, everyone would lose their memory without the support of Buddhist supernatural powers. But the current situation of everyone means that there are either 11 people or all of them will die. Either at least the little novice monk will die. Yu looked at her extremely miserable friends and colleagues. With tears on her face, she said angrily, "Yuan Huajing, Song Su, what is going on?" The Snow-White Chen Pingan tweeted, "Teaching people to heart-piercing human suffering, the more others can really empathize with them, the more difficult it is to live." Chen Pingan said, "Since I have arrived, where can you escape?" He stepped back a few steps with his arms folded, turned around and looked at Chen Pingan, was silent for a moment, and sneered, "Poor." Chen Pingan was silent. For the first time, he said in his heart, "Chen Pingan, have you ever thought that the person she has been waiting for is me, not you?" Chen Pingan turned his head and looked at himself. In fact, he can't be regarded as a demon's, he is not like him, but he is incomplete. He folded his sleeves with both hands, looked towards the sky, narrowed his eyes and muttered, "I am more suitable than you. The further you go, the more suitable." He slowly stretched out a hand, and beside the two, there was a light, like a star hanging in the sky, and then a bright sword light flashed by in an instant. The light was dragged by the sword energy and followed the sword light. He smiled and looked at Chin Pingan, and said in his heart, "You are actually very clear. This is why Mr. Qi told her not to take action easily. He neither taught you any superior swordsmanship nor protected you too much. Sword energy is really useful in our path of cultivation. One thing, but looking back, it can't affect the overall trend of any one vein. Kaitenshin, if you can kill that spirit, there is still a Liang. Looking around, at the mouth of the well, if you can kill Cui Dongshan at the bottom of the well, it doesn't matter in the long run." He shook his head and said to himself, "It's surprising that she really kept her promise." Chen Pingan said, "Don't forget, you are not human." He smiled and complained, "How can you scold yourself like that?" In fact, he can talk harshly. For example, "I know all of you, but Chen Pingan cannot understand me now. Be careful to push me into anxiousness, so let's not be a sword repairer. Circumstances, the natal thing belonging to the 5 elements, let's break most of them first. It just doesn't make sense. It's not that this guy doesn't care about hacking himself to death, he will only care about the cost and the consequences. The most hateful thing is that this guy's biggest reliance is not that the old scholar and Ning Yao are nearby, but that oneself will sincerely believe that even if the road is temporarily cut off, the big deal is that the Chongqing Bridge was interrupted when he was a teenager, and he can start all over again." Chen Pingan sneered, "This is my biggest support, so do you despise yourself?" He sighed, smiled brightly, and raised a hand, "Then it's a special one. See you later." It's a pity that some small talk, plus the previously deliberately arranged this scene, failed to let this rushing self, with a trace of divinity mixed in with the new, then this is not possible. Otherwise, who is Chen Pingan who is really going out? When the time comes, it is nothing more than to find another suitable time. The sword opens the sky, quietly travels far away, and meets her at the ancient sword-making place. Chen Pingan just squinted and nodded. He looked around and curled his lips. "If you lose, you will lose too early, and you will be restrained, or you will be more than enough." He looked at the female ghost, smiled and said, "Dare you dare to wipe the oil in the future?" Gain just glanced at those golden eyes, she almost collapsed on the spot, she didn't dare to say a word. The existence around Chen Pingan seems to be no matter what they say, do, no matter whether they smile or not, but they have no emotions. All the expressions, emotions, and behaviors are drawn out. They are dead objects, as if they were that. The corpse picked out by the existence in the tomb of eternal ages. He withdrew his gaze, the whole person was like a piece of unsullied glass, beginning to break and dissipate, but for this small world, he did not increase or decrease at all, his eyes were deep, the golden light flowed like stars, and he just looked at Chen Pingan and said in the last sentence, "Great freedom is to make yourself not free, but I can't figure it out." Inside, the small world made up of a caged sparrow, followed the white-clothed Chen Pingan, and dissipated together. Chen Pingan was expressionless, and did not rush to put away his caged bird and Jing Zhongyue. Instead, he immediately narrowed the scope of the world with the caged bird, just covering the place where the white dress was dissipated, and then reminded Sui Lin, "You can reverse this short period of time. My flying sword will help you protect the road, open the way all the way, and let everyone return to the previous alley." Generally speaking, that self can take the opportunity to separate a part or even a grain of mind, and hide in the long river of time. For example, it may be somewhere in the little world of ancient mirrors, or the mind of a certain monk. In the soul, it may even be on a certain robe, treasure armor, or somewhere in the yin. In short, there are countless possibilities. But that self didn't dare, because after Chen Pingan would ask her husband to go back to the Confucian temple, let the Li Xing examine the matter himself. Once caught, the fate can be imagined. If you want it, that guy must want it. It seems to be a superfluous act, but it is not. No matter what, no matter whether that guy has a backhand, Chen Pingan will do it. You will have to trouble Li Xing to check the time personally. After all, he has deceived. It's actually difficult for myself, but it's easy to deceive myself. Sui Lin trembled and asked, Mr. Chen, how do we deal with this memory? Chen Pingan sneered, one by one, if you have enough to eat, you can do nothing, then just keep it for your meal, and remember it later. Sui Lin teamed up with the little novice monk, and after reversing the long river of time, they returned to each place instantly. Only Chen Pingan was still standing inside Yuan Huajing's house. The little novice monk put his hands together immediately, and said 3 times silently, Buddha blessing, go back and donate some merit money. If you do, you can borrow if you have no money. In the alley, Han Zhoujin, Guling, and Sui Lin appeared out of thin air. After Sui Lin did this, he fell directly to the ground and was helped by Guling. One by one immediately returned to the inn. Wearing a green shirt, standing in the corridor outside the door of the house with both hands and sleeves. Except for Sui Lin, who was still fainted and supported by others, all the others stood in the courtyard below the steps. Yuan Huajing looks like a dead pig who is not afraid of boiling water, but the sweat on his forehead reveals the extremely unstable Dao heart of this Yuaning realm sword repairman. Song Su was previously crushed by the flying sword by that Chen Pingan. Although the time was reversed and the flying sword was no problem, the sword repaired the sword's heart greatly, and now he was sluggish. As soon as Kushu saw Chen Pingan now, don't care what it was. Anyway, he couldn't help but tremble. The eyes of the young Go Cun looking at Chen Pingan changed from awe and the past to fear. The female ghost gained directly shifted her gaze, not looking at the hidden official at all. Yu Yu has arms around her chest. The girl is not as tough as the Taoist heart. She is a little bit complacent. Look, let's be cut and chopped. Chen Pingan almost couldn't hold back. He gave a punch on the spot, took a deep breath, and said, wake up Sui Lin. Guling and Lu Hui on both sides of Sui Lin immediately followed suit. Sui Lin Yu woke up and was about to hold a fist to thank the hidden official. Chen Pingan had already stretched out his hand. Sui Lin, who was pale and colorless, asked carefully, Mr. Chin. Chen Pingan said, since you guys don't need to go to the wild world, you can get those lock sword charms for whatever you want. Sui Lin quickly took out the stack of golden talisman paper from his sleeve, pushed it gently, and floated towards the young hermit. Chen Pingan took Fu Lu and looked at everyone. One by one was silent. It is Lu Hui who knows scholars best, and smiled and said, borrow. It was lent to Mr. Chen. Chen Pingan came into his sleeve and passed away in a flash. Everyone was relieved, and several of them just sat on the floor. Just as Song Su was about to speak, Yuan Huajing showed a tired look and took the lead and said, this matter is recorded by the Ministry of Rights. It is all my fault and has nothing to do with hard work. Chen Pingan appeared at the alley, glanced at the library, and sighed. Brother, if you do this, it's really annoying. Walking all the way to the entrance of the inn, the more I thought about it, the more annoying. I immediately turned around, went to the alleyway, shrank the mountains and rivers, and went straight back to the Xianjian. Except for Go Cun and the little novice monk, the other 9, one of them fell, and all where Chen Pingan fell to the ground. Sword of Coming Chapter 839. Ning Yao, who was innocent holding one of the 4 fairy swords, glanced at the people in the courtyard, and asked in her heart, what is going on? Chen Pingan explained the process in detail. Ning Yao frowned when he heard it, and looked more at Yuan Huajing and the painful hand. Only after being so casually glanced by Ning Yao, Yuan Huajing, who was in the Yuaning realm with sword repairs, and the bitter hand of the Jin Dan realm, felt a kind of oppression by the great avenue of the heavens in the dark. The two monks couldn't breathe instantly. Chang, the spiritual flow not only began to stagnate, there were even signs of freezing like water. This is an ascending realm swordsman. If it is an enemy, the chi practitioner under the upper 5 realms may not be as good as the ants. The other Chen Pingon, who was evoked by painstaking efforts, had a pure divine nature. He was neither a complete Chen Pingon, but only talked about killing power, but was higher than Chen Pan's. Just because of the Hadao sword chi Great Wall, it was like a lawless and uninhibited transfiguration demon that was directly suppressed and imprisoned in the city. The painstaking water-stopping realm can mimic Chen Pingon in the mirror, but it's like unable to dig out a night-walking sword out of thin air, just as it cannot crush the half of the Great Wall of sword chi and the 2 great avenues of the world. Therefore, Chen Pingon was released from the cage at once. After that, the 2 Chen Pingon met. Both of them seemed to have not made a sword or a punch. In fact, if Chen Ping's mental state had some flaws, he would be silently found out by that existence that climbed to the well wall, climbed to the well, and finally left the road. There is even a chance to turn the guest oriented. Anyone accidentally loses the game, but so. Ning Yao was silent for a moment, and said, compared with the attack on Joshin account, it is much more dangerous. Chen Pingon smiled, it's okay, just treat the past as a good thing. What's more, you are not afraid of early things for bad things, and you are not afraid of late for good things. You can face it earlier so that you can prepare early. Why do you have to go back to the inn to beat people? Is it a grudge? It's about saving talent. Otherwise, Ning Yao heard about the incident at the inn. As far as her character, apart from anything else, the sword light fell straight. It is estimated that the earthly branch will become a thing of the past. As for the 2 yamen of Li and Xing, they must be flying. The dog jumps. Make trouble again. Just another sword light. Ning Yao annoyed, you still protect them like this. One bad guy. Chen Pingon said helplessly, after all, it was cultivated by the senior, so I can't be beaten by my junior. He gently grabbed Ning Yao's sleeve and laughed softly, don't be angry. Ning Yao stared, let go. Chen Pingon stalked and said, if you don't get angry, I will let go. Chen Pingon smiled bitterly, because I have been pursuing the so-called errorless. Then I joined a more cruel brother. In Shijianhu, self-breaking golden guts, Chen Pingon is equivalent to completely losing the possibility of cultivating Confucian natal characters. The bigger trouble is not that Chen Pingon is destined to not be the sage of the Confucian temple in this life, but that he has lost some kind of invisible shelter of the sage's doctrine. Otherwise Chen Pingon will be in a state of mind, like being in a lake of emptiness. In the Confucian temple, Chen Pingon, who was born out of pure divine nature, was naturally unable to make waves. As a result, Cui Yang cut off this path directly, which made Chen Pingon have to rely on his true heart to work harder with himself. Tug of war with each other, a fight for life and death, and decide who you are in the end. Earlier, Chen Pingon finally walked the Great Wall of Sword Chi and the land of lotus roots. In fact, he did not like to blindly deny himself. As a result, when he arrived at Shujian Lake, his brother Cui Huang was like directly giving a head-on sap, a pot of cold water toppings. Chen Pingon completely returned to his original form. You Chen Pingon will not only make mistakes, the more you study, the greater your ability to settle down, and the greater the mistakes you will make. The brother gave Chen Ping only 2 paths, one path, and practicing sword and boxing was still okay. But in the state of mind, he either escaped from Zen or turned to practice the method of keeping one law similar to Tao Men Xinzhai. The other is to continue the old path, but you just fail to become a moral saint of Confucianism. I and I are bothered by each other for a long time. Anyway, Brother Chui Yang felt that his brother Chen Pingan was not bitter enough, not long enough. Therefore, the former white-clothed Chen Pingan, who lost all the restraints of human nature, came to the world as a god, and then it was a big killing with no suspense about the outcome. And this was because he had stopped deliberately. If he hadn't said it, he was too restrained, and Chen Pingan came too fast. The 11 people in Yuan Huajing would only end up miserably. Life is better than death. A situation they could never imagine. Just say that Cui Dongshan, a student of Chen Pingan, has supernatural powers in his sleeves. Chen Pingan has just deliberately refrained from imitating. If Chen Pingan realizes that he hasn't come to the inn for a long time, let him make trouble here, only talk about the universe in his sleeves, and add the painter's coloring eyebrows. With supernatural powers, in conjunction with his decoupling of human nature, he only needs to imitate the style of Jing Juzhong and Wu Shuangjiang, and wantonly dispatch, separate and integrate the minds and memories of everyone, so that everyone can feel like they are in a dream without knowing dreams. The more you do not rely on external objects, the more you will kill the Tao. At the moment, the realm of the immortal realm, if it is used once, it will directly break the Chongqing Bridge and cut off the path of cultivation. Most of the others have a magical power to connect people together, so that the remaining 10 people can help Sui Lin share the damage of the Great Road, so that Sui Lin does not even need to fall, and ultimately only consumes those golden body fragments. It was very likely that Song Su's natal flying sword was caused by some magical power. Song Su answered the question. Feijian is called Post Road. Chen Pingan smiled and said, a gentleman can nourish his heart, not be good at honesty. Song Su, do you know what my husband is saying? It is impossible for Song Su to be the leader of a small hill just by relying on a golden pill sword repair, or the identity of the prince of the Song family of Li, and then adding a flying sword that assists Sui Lin in reversing the river. Can convince the crowd. Song Su hesitated for a moment, with some complex expressions, and said softly, there is also a flying sword named Nursery Rhymes, which was taken with the help of the national teacher. Chen Pingan's eyes were softer, and he began to chat, and asked, His Royal Highness, at the side of the company, have you met with your uncle, right? How much? Song Su didn't have anything to hide, and nodded, I've seen 3 sides, twice in discussions, and once in private, but I don't talk much, but I know that the emperor takes care of me very much. It's just that the emperor is not good because of some scruples. Talk to me more. Chen Pingan nodded and smiled, this guy Song Jisin has been a neighbor to me for many years. He couldn't keep talking when he was a kid. He doesn't keep his mouth open for good and bad, and he likes to speak in the opposite direction. Much better. I remember back then I went home with a basket of wild vegetables. I used dog's tail grass to string a lot of stream fish, which I wanted to stick on the windowsill and expose them to become dried fish. Song Jisin squatted on the wall at that time, saying the water draft is not small, so he wants to play with it. Originally it was nothing, Song Jas' salary had to add a sentence of reward for copper money at the end. At that time, Chen Pingan only said that he didn't need to pay, Song Jisin was not happy. Chen Pingan couldn't ask him to go up the mountain to catch snakes and fish in the water, so he gave up. So that in Chen Pingan's future life, whenever he hears or thinks of the 2 words hypocritical, he will immediately think of Song Jisin, a neighbor of many years. Chen Pingan smiled and said, Song Su, you emperor's uncle has a stinking problem, the only thing that is more acceptable, that is, there is a little conscience left. Song Su's face was strange. I remembered the leisurely Qing Shan sword fairy in front of me. Painfully placed the water-stopping mirror in the natal Qi palace and whispered, Mr. Chen, I'm sorry. Chen Pingan smiled and said, it's not terrible to make mistakes unintentionally. If you want to correct them, you will practice. He clasped his fists and said in a deep voice, Mr. Chen's teaching, the younger generation will remember it. After that, Chen Pingan found Yu, Sui Lin, and Lu Hui in one breath. Chen Pingan asked straightforwardly, "If I am the demon in the future, what will you do?" Sui Lin and Lu Hui's faces were pale, but Yu was the first to speak. "I definitely can't beat it. I'll be a nascent soul monk with peace of mind. After that, I will hold my thigh and drag my back. Anyway, I won't take the initiative to leave. Those who belong to the earthly branch, wait until the Ministry of Rights and the criminal department rush people." Chen Pingan felt that the little soldier girl who actually served as the backstage sergeant of the earthly branches was probably not her own demon. The heart is so big, it's not common. There are roughly two types of so-called mind demon. For example, those who are dedicated to cultivating power do not think much about anything. In fact, they are also regarded as pure Tao minds, and they will be suppressed by the strength of the mind demon. When there is a threshold, there will always be a situation where the road is 1 foot high and the devil is 1 foot high. It is like going to a hall and someone will stop him, and this person just stands on the threshold, slightly higher than the outsider. In addition, there is a more illusory Taoism. The biggest flaw in the state of mind, the big gap in the cultivation of the mind of the monk, is the place where the mind demon is born. Chen Pingan said to Sui Lin and Lu Hui respectively, "Sui Lin, both Buddhism and Taoism have the inheritance of the same law. Go to the archives or consult the experts. After that, you will go to the Chongshu Bureau and the Translation Bureau. In the two places, listen more and think more, and then gradually gather your Xinqing into one." This process seems to be normal, but listening to people preaching and preaching is actually not easy. You must be psychologically prepared. Lu Hui, you first find a solution to the predicament by yourself. It really won't work. One day in the future, if you really feel that you are hopeless, you will come to Luopa Mountain to find me. I will teach you a Confucian training order. In fact, Lu Hui was the one who suffered the most from the pond fish. To a large extent, he suffered a disaster without deliberately tortured him before. Because the white-clothed Chen Pingan, who came into the world with a godly posture, what he hates the most, or what he finds the most difficult, is actually Lu Hui's identity, a scholar, or a scholar. Sui Lin and Lu Hui each inspected and worked their own way, and sincerely thanked this Mr. Chin. Yu asked, "Mr. Chin, what should I do?" "Is there any, you have the final say." "Why, you are Yu Pu and I am Yuaning. I am Jian Xiao and you are Jian Xian. Relying on my illusory age for several decades, I will put myself on the prestige. What is the name of that natal flying sword?" "Yilong. My brother helped you get it." Yuan Huajing nodded. "It was named by the national teacher himself. In fact, it wasn't the name at the beginning, it was Stop Spirit, which was more in line with Fijian's magical powers. Do you know the intention? The national teacher is reminding me not to be arrogant. Yilong is arrogant." Chen Pingan shook his head. "If you read less, you will think more shallowly." Yuan Huajing frowned, and then said sincerely, "I implore Lord Qin Shan to solve my doubts. After all, it involves Tao practice, so Yuan Huajing can't be taken care of." Chen Pingan said slowly, "If you don't walk at night, how can you know that there are nocturnal people on the road? If you don't become an immortal, how can you know whether there is a real immortal in the mountains and forests in the world? Although it is also to remind you not to be arrogant, but among them there are several more meanings, and even the answer to why I warned you not to be arrogant, I have already told you it a long time ago. Even if you become a nightwalker, the sky is heavy and you can't see your fingers, you will still be stunned, and you still don't know what the world is." Yuan Huajing chewed it carefully. It was indeed very meaningful, and nodded, "Teached." Ning Yao asked heartily, "Really?" Chen Pingan replied heartily, "I'm talking nonsense, teaching him how to be a man." Ning Yao held back a laugh. Sure enough, it was right to stay. It was more interesting than reading. Chen Pingan said casually, Yuanhua Jing, if you were born in the Great Wall of Sword Qi, you can have similarly high sword skills with the so-called top geniuses like Qi Shou and Gao Yeho. You may be a little bit close, but the gap between the two sides is not too big to catch up. Your biggest problem is that it's easy to die on the battlefield because you will be deliberately targeted by the big demon and you are unwilling to give you a chance to grow up. Yuan Huajing nodded, I will definitely strive to survive. I believe that if I really are a local swordsman of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, fighting side by side with the hermit, the Summer Palace will definitely arrange a guardian for me. Ning Yao said in a heart, you said nothing wrong, but it's awkward to listen to it. Chen Pingan said with a heartfelt smile, there is no age, no experience, and he is a kind man who taught him to be a man in the Great Wall of Jianqi in the middle of the night. Chen Pingan asked again, do you want to create a complete existence similar to a small earth branch only by relying on your own flying sword magical powers and drawing on the gourd, when you become an immortal in the future? If you need to close the door without thinking about it. There will be more people who are still outside the door. Think about it. Ning Yao wondered, I taught you this. Chen Pingan smiled and said, teached. Then turned around, Chen Pingan said heartily, actually, I know that it is not easy for my husband to be in Aquarius Island now. There is just a reason for my husband to return to the Central 2 Confucian Temple earlier. The husband is actually only in 2 places now, so he can relax, the Middle-earth Confucian Temple and the Lin of Gongda. Then there are the 3 continents of Hedao, Nanpa Suozhou, Tongyizhou, and Fuyaozhou. Even if the husband restored the Confucian Temple, the mountains and rivers of the 3 continents were broken too much, so to appear outside the land of the 3 continents would be even worse. So Chen Pingan wanted to talk more with her husband, but didn't want him to suffer for this. At the inn not far away, the old shopkeeper is the old fox after all. The old man who came to get the girl late, saw that she was forcibly stopped the girl before, and it might be counterproductive. If nothing can be done, and he wants to make a living, he takes the initiative to let him. The girl went to find Na Ningyao and learned art from her teacher. Naturally, there was some truth in the girl's side. Generally, women from the rivers and lakes would have at most a saber, but Na Ningyao directly carried a sword box on his back. Is his fist and kick skills bad? If this isn't the heroine of the rivers and lakes, who is it? So the silly girl really knocked on the door. The bored girl came to the counter now, her eyes lit up and she saw the bag of twists. Father, why did you think of buying twists for me? She picked up one, crunchy. The old shopkeeper was not confused, saying that it was the kindness of Chen Pingan, and gave a bag of food for nothing, but he smiled and said, I'm a dad, I don't feel sorry for my girl. When I'm a girl, I don't have any points in my heart. The girl vaguely said, distressed and distressed, there are countless numbers. The old shopkeeper asked, why don't you apprentice a teacher? The old man also smiled and added, if you still have the heart, Dad can help. The girl shook her head and said, forget it, I heard my father earlier and knocked on the door. I ran out of courage. I found myself afraid of Master Ning. She stared and raised her eyebrows, and I was about to be speechless. Following the example of Na Ningyao, the girl made a gesture of raising her eyebrows and staring, and then laughed to herself. The old shopkeeper glanced at the greased paper bag, a little disturbed, and smiled and said fair words, don't say anything else, that Chen Pingan is really not a sullen disciple. The girl almost choked and laughed, I was really scared at the beginning, of course I know now, people, it's not bad. I'm not stupid. Every time this guy looks at Master Ning's eyes, he is actually affectionate. It is said in the book that a good girl is afraid of Lang Zhan, and he must have been stalking him, hushing cold and asking warmth, and chasing after Master Ning. It's just that you can't say that, otherwise Dad will think that she reads too many miscellaneous books and spends money indiscriminately. The girl picked up the second crispy twist and asked, "Father, you said he is not a slumber, he is still a stranger, and it is the first time to come to our inn. Why did you see me that night? Is the look so weird?" The old man thought for a while, and gave his own reasons. "Maybe you have admitted to the wrong person. At first glance, you may think that you are very similar to someone in the evening. People in the martial arts see many people, the story of the rivers and lakes many." The old scholar smiled at the door and asked, "Brother Lu, can I borrow 2 stools from you? Would you mind basking in the sun at the entrance of the inn?" The old shopkeeper smiled and said, "What a big deal, it's easy to talk about it." The girl immediately helped to move 2 benches and put them outside the door. "It is not too hot today, and it is indeed not hot." When Chen Pingan and Ning Yao arrived at the entrance of the inn, the old Shuozai sat on a bench with Chen Pingan. Ning Yao and the girl who joined the fun sat aside, but the girl thought for a while, and finally left. After Chen Pingan said that, the old scholar nodded and said, "Small things, I will go to the saint after drinking." Ning Yao said, "I just happened to go to the Confucian temple together." The old scholar quickly shook his head and waved his hand, "Don't, I have to come back, and I will leave Aquarius Island together next time." Ning Yao turned his head and looked at Chen Pingan. Chen Pingan nodded, and Ning Yao stopped insisting. The old scholar did not squint, but in fact he was happy in his heart. We are in this vein. Wen Xing's lineage, if you say that from his husband's knowledge to the strengths of several students in his early years, he is simply invincible. Perhaps the only place that is slightly inferior to others is that they are looking for their own wives. Now they are invincible. The old scholar chuckled softly. Mr. once lost his status as a sacred person, smashed his idols, and was banned from learning. In the 100 years since he was imprisoned, he actually had fun things. Can you guess? Chen Pingan smiled and nodded, and then passed a pot of wine. The old Shuozai took the hip flask with a suspicion on his face, and waved his hand. "No, if I can guess this, the old man and the saint of rights will grab my disciple from me." Chen Pingan took a sip of wine by himself. In the past, if Haoran talked about my senior brothers, there must be a Wen Xingdi biography. At the time of Gongda Lin, the husband was down and was only regarded as senior brothers. Mr. is not worried about it, but will only be happy and enjoy it. The old scholar caressed his beard and smiled. Who said no? Suzy said so many delightful things, but in fact I want to see it. It's only the joy of stealing, the most worthy of joy. Ning Yao smiled heartily. It's no wonder that several great monks on the top of the mountain all know Wen Xing's most partial disciple. The old scholar had drunk the wine and got up and said, "The gentleman will go ahead. You may need to find the auntie and say thank you to this senior. After that, he will probably be out of the capital for a day or 2. Chen Pingan wanted to get up, but the old scholar held his shoulders, turned his head, and asked, "Chance, understand?" Chen Pingan didn't even nod his head. "It is necessary, sir, please close your eyes quickly to avoid such a move." The old scholar was suddenly stunned, and it made sense. It is more than words. The old scholar first went to the fire temple to find the Auntie Feng. Under the flower shed, Aunt Feng, who was sitting on the steps and drinking, immediately got up to greet her. Wanfang gave a blessing with her demeanor. "I have seen Mr. Wen Xing." The old scholar sat on a stone bench and smiled. "Just come here to say thank you, seniors, don't be too late. If you dislike it, I can punish myself for 3 cups. Oh, look at my memory, forget to bring drink." Aunt Feng threw a jar of 100 flowers into the past, and the old scholar opened the mud seal and sniffed. Good wine are so good that they can't bear to drink it. The old scholar kept the posture of carrying alcohol without drinking, squinting at Auntie Seal. Aunt Feng waited for a long time, but had to throw another altar over. Otherwise, the virtues of old talents can really go on like this. She sighed faintly in her heart. If you want to talk about suffering, this Wenxing can indeed survive. When I think of this, Aunt Feng doesn't care about the 2 jars of 100 flowers. Besides, the disciples of the old scholars also deceived the 2 jars. This old talent and his close disciple walked one forefoot and the other for the back foot. They were exactly the same style. But Wenxing's line, the rest Chui Yang, left and right, Lu 16, Qi Jing Chen, which one would be so shameless? Fortunately, Chen Pingan finally accepted Chao Sunny as a student, who is considered a serious scholar. The old scholar put down the altar in his hand and hugged the second altar of Baihuan Yang with both hands. He said with a guilty face, "I am embarrassed, embarrassed and embarrassed. Seeing that this matter has been organized, it looks like I have come to beg for a drink." Aunt Feng smiled, a wisp of breeze between her fingers, and in the end it was the words of the old scholar who closed the door, which sounded from the flower shed. The old scholar raised his ears to listen, embraced the wine jar with one hand, and stroked his beard with one hand and laughed, "Goodness! This is what makes blue out of blue and better than blue." It turned out to be at the entrance of the inn. Chen Pingan found that Ning Yao was staring at her, lowered her head after drinking and then looked up. She still looked at herself. Chen Pingan immediately vowed, "Heaven and earth conscience, it is the husband who wants to go wrong." In fact, it's not a trivial matter, it's just that it doesn't look very eye-catching compared to the major events of other mansions and accompanying capitals. Ning Yao said, "It's really not like what Song Jisin will do." In her impression, Song Jisin is a son who has no worries about food and clothing. There is also a maid who is not good in name, appearance, and character. One is squeamish and the other is hypocritical, and the two are a good match. Chen Pingan explained with a smile, "It may be that Song Jisin feels that when scholars have no money, they have to have no money. Before leaving the school, if there is no money, they should study hard every day, and be honest. Fame. It's just that young students or young Confucian scholars have insufficient determination." Song Jisin went to settle accounts with those who had the courage to make this money. Song Jisin hated him the most when he was a child. In fact, it happened that he had no worries about food and clothing, and he had too much money in his pocket. This is not considered hypocritical. After all, he is poked on the backbone every day by neighbors in the neighborhood and scolds illegitimate children. It's all uncomfortable. Song Jisin is so squeamish. He never moved out when he arrived at a place like Mud Bottle Lane, probably because I felt that I was almost like him. One is that he has no parents, and the other is that there is no such thing. So living in Ni Ping Alley, so that Song Jisin will not be too comfortable. Chen Pingan finished drinking, put the empty jug on the bench, poured some salted soybeans from the sleeves in one palm, and handed it to Ning Yao. Ning Yao dialed half of it. After learning boxing, especially after becoming a pure martial artist in the Golden Figure, the calluses of Chen Pingan's hands and feet have disappeared. Chen Pingan twisted a soybean and threw it into his mouth. The shoe gently bumped it. The pair of cloth shoes on his feet were sewn by the old chef himself. The craftsmanship is more exquisite than women's needlework. On the mountain, those who are willing to wear cloth shoes are well equipped. As for Jiang Shang, there are really a few pairs. Especially how much money Jiang Shang really spent was even harder to say. In fact, there are 2 pairs of cloth shoes sewed by Shaun Wanshu, but Chen Pingan was reluctant to wear them, so they kept them inside the square. Chen Pingan is determined to take Ning Yao back to Luopa Mountain this time, and Ning Yao will definitely have it. Nguan Shu, the busiest little housekeeper every day, can't think of anything. Chen Pingan ate the salted soybeans, smiled, and his eyes were gentle, as if he had seen a girl in a pink skirt, who had left her house early in the morning. When she walked alone in no one, she would gently lift up her sleeves and walk briskly. I quickly walked to the door of a house, slowed down, picked up a bunch of keys, skillfully selected one, opened the door, brooms, rags, water scoops, buckets. Be organized, get busy, sweep the courtyard, wipe the tables and stools, and dry them. Bedding. What, you bigly cavalry dare to encircle me, Luopa Mountain? Chen Pingon turned his head and glanced at the direction of the imperial palace. It is possible that the 11 people of the earthly branch have not realized one thing until now. He is higher than the white-clothed Chen Pingon. The latter is only part of him after all. This means that at a certain moment, Chen Pingon will use all the means of that pure divine nature, and that the battle in the cage, the other himself, did not exert all his strength. Ningyao noticed the change in Chen Pingan's mood, turned his head and asked, "What's wrong?" Chen Pingan closed his gaze and smiled, "It's nothing, but the more I think about it, the more angry I get. I look back and find some wood to make a food box to hold a late-night snack." Ningyao didn't bother to ask what this anger has to do with carpenter's work and late-night snacks. He just asked, "Within half a month, Nan Yan will really take the initiative to hand over the tiles. If you leave out the natal lamp that I found behind, it's not necessarily true. So in the house, did you scare her casually?" "It's not all scares, but it's mainly to make her sleepless and sleepy, and if she is suspicious, she will see that everyone is a ghost." Chen Pingon sneered and slowly said, "This Empress Dowager is actually a very useful person. She didn't give up the broken piece of porcelain if she was killed. Not only was she lucky at the beginning and wanted to pursue profit. To maximize, her original idea was that there was a best situation, that is, when I was in the house, I nodded on the spot and agreed to the deal. In this way, not only did she not need to return the tiles, she could also win over for the Dolly court. A sword repairer in the upper 5 realms and a martial artist in the end of the boundary, there is no name for worship, but there is actual worship. Besides the Baiyujing and the Baidu, there are monks from the earthly branch and one line in the dark behind the scenes, slowly accumulating cultivation bases, and having me and Luopashan in the bright place. It is naturally very beneficial to the Song family of Dolly. It is obviously her. Make mistakes first, calculate insidiously, but want me to disregard her suspicion and turn the enemy into a friend. The second advantage is that in the other 8 continents of the Howran world, the Dolly Song family can earn a reputation for treating those who have done meritorious services. 3. As the Lord of Luopa Mountain, I have the incense relationship with Beiju Luzhou. The next sect was founded in Tonggishao, and Dei can share a piece of the pie. Of course, Dei court will be very pragmatic in doing things, and both parties will benefit each other. Reciprocity. 4th, I am still the last hermit of the Great Wall of Sword Qi. In the future, there will definitely be Lu Jinglong, as well as foreign sword immortals like Xie Songhua and Yu Yu, to have a relationship with Aquarius Island and Dei. This pair of Dei dynasty, the Kendo luck is invisible, it is very beneficial. Finally, as a disciple of my husband, I can help the Song family of Dolly build a bridge with the Confucian temple, and the Song family can completely leave the Yunlin Jiang family behind. Treasures of heaven, material and earth, who are you not giving them? For example, the 11 people of the earthly branch and the 2 Yamen of Dolly did not pay less. The cost of a random fight is calculated with Gu Yes money. Chen Pingon threw all the last bit of salted soybeans into his mouth, and said vaguely, "These are the reasons why she speaks so well at the beginning. You are the Empress Dowager of a country, so she considers the overall situation and says she is humble. It's not an exaggeration. Don't look at the large foreign debts that Dolly owes. In fact, his family is very rich. If the brother was not preparing for the Second War, he would have expected that the frontier cavalry would need to rush to the wilderness, and he would be able to help casually. It is for the Dali court to pay off the debt. Ning Yao said, the fame and benefits are available. This Nanzan takes the best advantage and has a good calculation. Chen Pingan clapped her hands. If she says that she has long hair and short insights, we have been wronged by our great Empress Dowager. Ning Yao frowned and said, there must be a bigger reason to support her to the end. Is it from the Liu family of Zhongtu? Chen Pingan said, as long as you are an individual, you will have something to care about. Nanzhan is of course no exception. For example, what is the surname of Dei in the future, or whether the surname is Song, whether her son is the emperor, or the dynasty of Dei, is it possible to preserve half of the territory of Aquarius, and whether her Empress Dowager's noble status can be preserved, especially whether she can rejoin politics, such as taking advantage of my brother's absence. Will she have the opportunity to control the monks of the earthly branch, and then she? Her own life, or as a child of the Liu family, the Middle-earth Liu family placed a chess piece in Ao Pingzhou. Is there anything more important than her life, etc.? Each has its own severity and depth. Anyway, the more you those who can't help but practice the way, the more things can do more than life and death. After all, many mountain methods make it very difficult for people to want to die. In contrast, the old attendant in the lion park of Qinghuan country, his name is more important than his fate. Of course, not the kind of polite fame. They only heard the truth that the upper beam is not correct and the lower beam is crooked. Never thought that there is such a thing as the upper beam and the lower beam being crooked. But it is real, really real. Such a black charcoal girl is indeed brought up by Chen Pingan. It's like a jump and grow up. She has walked so far by herself. In fact, everyone in Luopa Mountain knows well. Don't think that Chen Pingan is the fiercest on Pei Qian's side, the strictest discipline, seems to have the worst temper, but in the eyes of the young mountain owner, the gentleness of Pei Qian will not lose. Give warm trees and millet grains. Ning Yao joked, when Pei Qian gets married someday, I can worry about you. Chen Pingan coldly snorted, among the peers, there are not a few who are worthy of Pei Qian. Chen Pingan put his hands around his chest, if anyone dares to move his mind and shake those clever romantic tricks, ill him. Ning Yao smiled and said, come on, wherever you are, it will be very difficult for them to cheat Pei Qian. Chen Pingan nodded, that's true, quickly added, I still have to check. Then I kept adding, not only me, I have to secretly pull Zhu Lian, Cui Dongshan, Jiang Shangzhen, and Miyu together to help me check. The old cook is a past person, experienced, and Cui Dongshan is thoughtful. As for Chief Shou and Mitsishi, Sippy has the most accurate vision. No, I have to get a teacher, and whether the person who is in the school exam is really good at learning. Of course, if the guy is not good at character, nothing will be mentioned. Chen Pingan intertwined his fingers, raised his arms, stretched out, and whispered, when Pei Qian went to the Jianqi Great Wall for the first time, Cui Dongshan told me in private that Pei Qian went to the temple when he was a child. When the Bodhisattva kowtows, he will add a sentence sincerely at the end. If the Bodhisattva is very busy, you don't need to listen to it today. It doesn't matter if it doesn't work. I'll talk about it next time. I'll do it next time. Anyway, I'll come often. Recommend an app that is comparable to the old version of the book-chasing artifact, and can change the source books for Mimi reading. Pei Qian made him swear not to tell others. In fact, she doesn't want me as a master to know. Ning Yao turned his head and looked at his profile. Chen Pingan turned his head, smiled and said, isn't he handsome? Ning Yao nodded. Otherwise, Ning Yao will find an ugly monster. Otherwise, you can still make so many yin yin yen yen on the mountain, just watching the beautiful scenery, you will be a nympho. Chen Pingan was a little caught off guard, and he rarely blushed. Ning Yao remembered something. She had been to the backyard of the Yang family drugstore when she traveled to the Lizhu cave. She followed Chen Pingan. At that time, Old Man Yang asked Ning Yao 2 questions. On the top of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, a few words are engraved. Who is talking about the heart? Ning Yao said, I didn't think much about Old Man Yang's question about the voice of the heart at the beginning, but it was very helpful for me to break the bottleneck of Yupu realm and enter the fairyland off seeking truth in the colorful world. Chen Pingan nodded and said, no matter what, when I return to my hometown, I'll go to the backyard of the drugstore first. After saying this, Chen Pingan looked down at the cloth shoes on his feet. Ning Yao knows why. This is Chen Pingan reminding him who he is. Before in the Xianjian, when Chen Pingan sat on the steps, he had such an action. Maybe that mud bottle Ali the young apprentice gradually changed clothes, boots, status, age. But the only thing that hasn't faded away is the pair of straw sandals in my heart. Chen Pingan intends to make a special trip to ask Xiao Duanming later, what special authentic small restaurants in the capital, so that he can take Ning Yao around the streets and stroll around. Remembered some past events. If my beard is shaved, you too will not be as handsome as I am. Yuha, the hot pot is very spicy. Don't you have a drink at your fingertips? You can relieve the spicy. What do you look at? Will I blind you? Ah, it's a melon peel, I really believe it. Drink slowly, the wine can't get out of the bowl. Chen Pingan leaned forward, swaying his shoulders with his arms folded in his arms, looking at the quiet but deserted street. If you leave the home-cooked meals aside, Chen Pingan suddenly realizes that in fact, he has eaten in his entire life. The feast, big fish and meat, is one of the few. The first meal was a trip to school with Xiao Baoping and the rest of his life. At the attendant's house, he had a meal that allowed Chen Pingan to have a small sacred mountain offering, followed by a banquet in Nanyuan Guojingcheng, a blessed land of lotus root flowers, and a banquet with the emperor and his family. Pingan rarely spent money to set up a banquet. At that time, he invited Han Jingling, the prince of Shihao Kingdom, and Huang He, the son of the general, to dinner and drink. Ning Yao asked, when did you stop wearing straw sandals? When you arrived at the Great Wall of Jinqi. Chen Pingan shook his head and smiled. I really want to say that for the first time, I arrived in the capital of Sui dynasty. At that time, I bought a special outfit and changed my boots. As a result, I wore it on my feet and was very awkward. I almost didn't know how to walk. And in the end, I didn't go to the academy. I secretly ran away and ran away. At that time, I was mainly worried that little Aquarius and Li Huai would stand up with me and be looked down upon. Later I realized that I was thinking too much, but actually not. It's time to escape. Then Chen Pingan laughed to himself. Actually, I didn't wear straw sandals before I was 5 years old. Even if we will join hands in the future, I feel like being tossed by you once, just like Mr. Chen said, just waiting in line the head is nothing. Besides, you have to admit one point. As far as you are concerned, you are no longer half-hearted. Then go ask Mr. Chen about the sword. It is meaningless to deceive yourself and others. For our Jian Xiu, this is actually a complete loss. The next thing you have to do is to patch up your state of mind. Otherwise the most likely demons are not Sui Lin and Lu Hui, but Yu Yuan. Transformation. By the way, if in the next 100 years, a person with the best spiritual aptitude will eventually become the person with the lowest level, what I can do is not to win a joke about Yuan Huajing. Yuan Huajing turned to look at the young prince who was repaired by the golden core sword. You are much smarter than I thought. Song Su shook his head and said, compared to Mr. Chen and the Emperor, I am so smart. This Yuan Huajing is definitely not a hero, he is ambitious and a hero. Song Su has always felt that a general who is dejected and vents his ancestral shadow is not as good as a mundane child who accumulates yin and virtue. That's why Song Su and Yuan Huajing couldn't talk together. Originally, two people, a Song prince, and a descendant of the Shangzhou kingdom's surname, should be the best match. Song Su put his hands on his chest, leaned back to Yuan Huajing, the second prince of Lili, facing the courtyard. Have you discovered that Mr. Qin and that Qin Pingan are like two extremes? The Chinese teacher once said that if any strong man in the world is just to be feared, it is not enough, it must be awe-inspiring. If we say that Qin Pingan, who opened the door by himself and walked out of the waterless realm before, makes us all desperate. It is the extinction of all things, so it is the Su and the 12 earthly branches. Then Mr. Qin, who came to rescue us later, was choosing our humanity recognized by him. At that time, he was Mao Qin. Xinlu Xin. It seemed all wrong, maybe more like Su. Everything else. Yuan Huajing looked back at that figure, as if he really knew this Prince Dolly for the first time. When Song Xuan raised that nursery rhyme, flying sword, especially becoming a monk of the earthly branch, it meant that Song Su would never be an emperor in his life. Yuan Huajing asked, Song Su, have you ever thought of becoming an emperor? Song Su nodded, of course I thought about it. I even hated this children's rhyme flying sword. Then one day, I suddenly didn't want to. That time was a ceremonial ceremony. We needed to be guarded secretly. I watched from a distance the emperor, who was wearing a dragon robe, surrounded by the stars. Of course, the emperor was also in the team. I don't know why, but I didn't envy him. On the contrary, it feels cramped, just like that dragon robe, which is a cage. I had a strange idea at the time, that is, our Emperor of Dolly, where can we go in this life? That night, I went to the city and stood there. At that high place, I suddenly found myself, like the sky and the earth, I can go wherever I want. Father and brother will not be successful. At that moment, I was willing to be a practitioner of proving the longevity. As the elder brother of Song Su, the Prince Dolly, the prince who will be nailed in the future, is indeed very tactical, and his wrists are not bad. It is a big difference between the predecessors and the predecessors. Knowing not to smash those porcelains, books and confessions, because they will record files, but sages and sages are not afraid to smash them. In the end, they can only take some silk and satin products to blow their breath, but the third brother is gentle, although the talent is not as good as brother, in Song Su's eyes, may be more resilient. As for the other younger siblings, Song Su is even more unfamiliar. In the courtyard, Yushu and Kaiyang Xianluo, how old are you? Song Suleng asked suddenly. You made the move without authorization this time. Did you get the instruction from someone in the palace? Yuan Huajing was silent. Song Su stopped asking more questions. There is already an answer. Not as an example. Song Su got up and left, turned his head and said, I said it. From today, Yuan Huajing has actually lost his status as the leader of the monks of the earthly branch. On the other side of the flower shed, the old Shuozai didn't actually drink. He raised Erlang's legs, interlaced his hands, and put them on his knees. It seemed that he glanced at the colorful knot that Aunt Feng tied with the blue silk. It was very valuable. Aunt Feng smiled and said, Why, Wen Sheng is here to help Bai Wafuti as a lobbyist and want me to return this thing. Or is it that the flower master gave me some good wine and flower cups for half sale and half selling during this discussion? A certain leader of the Middle-earth Confucian temple has softened his heart, so Jina Wenqing actually carried a saint's will with the constitution. The old scholar said with great righteousness, What is the matter between ladies? I am a big man, not good at. Except for his closed disciples, Wensheng's lineage is a bachelor who can't figure out this matter. The old scholar angrily said, Furthermore, it is directed at the many years of friendship between Aunt Fong and our Wensheng. Who dares to be so poor and white on my side, so young and old, and Aunt Fong, not to be scolded by me? 8 factors. Auntie Fong nodded, that's good, otherwise I'm going to give an eviction order. This colorful knot hides mystery, which is why there are so many flower gods in the history of Baiwa Footy. The flower gods of generations have never been able to have the root of an ascendant realm. Because of the incomplete lifeline of the natural avenue, entering the fairyland is equivalent to walking it's the end of a dead end. And the lack of 100 flowers land in the ascendant realm is ultimately inadequate. There are hundreds of flowers in the world, and she was really bullied by Aunt Fong. The old scholar said casually, the world is mutual cause and effect, this cause bears this result is the other cause, and the other cause is the result. Anyway, it is such a cycle of cause and effect, and the sage is infiltrated. The truth is such a truth, it can't be simpler. Therefore, things in the world are always going around and around, helping us to meet again, both good and bad. Just saying that you don't give an example is a hooligan, then I will give an example, and it is also a bit involved with Aunt Fong, such as the Great Wall of Jinchi, the criminal officer Haosu, you know? He was born in a blessed land in Fuyasu in the past. Not long ago, he cut off Nan Guangzheo's head and accepted an apprentice. He asked that child to swear to kill the flower pickers on the mountain, knowing that he shouldn't stay for long, tried to leave Haoran and seek refuge in the Qingming world, but was blocked by the Saint of Ceremonies. Of course, Auntie Fong doesn't think that Bai Yujing's invincible disposition would be so gloomy. It's just that the old scholar's seemingly random example is quite reasonable. Aunt Fong thought for a moment, stretched out her 2 fingers, twisted the colorful knot, and took it out of the blue silk. The old scholar seemed indifferent, but in fact her eyes were rolling. The old scholar is actually not helping people to resolve grievances. It's just a natural toil and can't help but say that it's done. Aunt Fong and Baiwa Footy have settled a grievance. It's the best, and it doesn't matter. Aunt Fong held the colorful knot the size of a copper coin, and the green silk was like a waterfall, pouring from one shoulder, like a sudden flood bursting a bank, flowing turbulently between the deep valleys and gullies. The old scholar suddenly raised a hand without squinting, "Senior, stop." Aunt Fong was puzzled, and joked, "Why, when I was the girl in the hook, I want to undress and undress. When things are coming, the big masters are instead counseled." The old scholar was so frightened that he couldn't speak well, and waved his hands vigorously, and drank a sip of the wine to suppress the shock. Suddenly, Aunt Fong rewrapped the colored knot on a blue silk, and said, "Understood. Wen Sheng wants to give this benefit to Chen Ping and to help him travel through China in the coming year, so as to forge a blessing with 100 flowers. Pile of good destiny." The old scholar smiled and said, "Senior is wise." Aunt Fong smiled and said, "Being a sir, is it hard work for the students to pave the way?" The old scholar shook his head and said, "Wrong. Let the many saints in the Middle-earth Confucian temple who did not recognize the knowledge of Wensheng's lineage before, and now they have greatly improved their impressions. It is the credit of my closed disciple. Seeing me, at best, it was a good deal with Wensheng, but now it is different, and I am willing to sincerely ask a few words from my old talent." And what made these old-fashioned changes their attitude was not Chen Pingan's sword, or even the deployment of soldiers and strategists who commanded the line of hidden officials in the Summer Palace, but this one who was more notorious in the Great Wall of Jinchi than Aliang. The scholars who originally hated Haoran's Great Wall of Sword Qi, and later Fei Xingcheng, there is the sound of Lang Longshu, especially for those local sword repairers, and gradually have a relatively peaceful attitude towards Haoran. At least they recognize Haoran's fact. There are good and bad. Perhaps Chen Pingan himself hasn't realized one thing yet. Although he has not personally changed a Shujianhu or anything, he has actually changed the customs of a sword like Great Wall. Probably this is the spring breeze diving into the night, moistening things silently. Aunt Fong lifted the slender puppet that was called the palm of her hand, and gently rubbed her red nails with the belly of her thumb, and asked casually, "The inn was very quiet before, didn't Wenxing seem particularly worried about Qin Pingan?" The old scholar shook his head and said, "Passing the heart pass and cutting the heart demon, my disciple of closing door, I am not here yet." But in fact, the old scholar almost called the saint directly. Anyway, bragging is not against the law. Then the old scholar smiled, turned around and picked up the wine jar. It's human nature to live a stable life for a long time. It is inevitable to be boring. This is human nature. The pleasures of the world are like drinking alcohol. Often when you wake up, it is extremely difficult to keep, only loss. But bitter things are like tea, and there are often opportunities to be free of bitterness, which makes people feel cherished. The ordinary thing is to drink water, which is not tasteful, but you have to drink it every day. Auntie Fong still bowed her head, with one hand cocked, and the other hand, gently touching the bright red nails, as if she hadn't heard the meaning of Wenxing. The old scholar gently put down the jar of 100-flower stuffed rice. Seeing that the auntie was deliberately pretending to be stupid, he simply pointed out, "Now don't think about betting anymore. It's considered kind enough. Besides, our ritual saint is not very good-tempered. I urge seniors to say that you don't mess with anyone." For thousands of years, the ritual has not said a few words in the Confucian temple. On the contrary, I have great patience with you, and I have never talked less. Don't take some scholars abiding by the rules as justified. Aunt Fong raised her head and said with a smile, "Okay, I know. Don't worry, in the Liju cave, I'm the one who listens to me the most." The old scholar nodded and said, "That's why I went through this experience." Aunt Fong did nothing less about betting, but compared to other old immortals, her methods are gentler and more recent, like Sun Jiashu of Lao Longqing, Zhou Ju from Guanhu Academy, and Aunt Fong. There have been different ways of preaching and protecting the way, such as the ancestral abacus of the Sun family, and the digital golden incense villain. The latter likes to roll on the abacus, which means the wealth is rolling. When Sun Jiashu meditates on the numbers, the golden little people will push the abacus beads. This is not a practice method, it is a veritable gift of supernatural power. Then there is the book on the House of the Sun family on the table, the inconspicuous oil lamp that needs to be constantly fueled by the patriarch of the Sun family is also the handwriting of Aunt Fong. Auntie Fong began to change the subject, saying, "The appointment letter written by Wenxing Gang Qin Pingan, is it counted as unprecedented? To talk about this, I have to drink a little wine to cheer up." The old Xiao just took a sip of Baihua stuffed rice. "It's okay. The old man has no time to talk to me in Suishan. The saint of ceremony is very busy." The three leaders of the Confucian temple, Fu Lao Fu, Jingxing Shiping plus together, anyway, there must be more than 20 scholars who are qualified to eat cold pork head. They are all kind to help review the text. Aunt Fong said with emotion, "To be honest, I still can't believe that Qin Pingan can really get to where I am today." The old scholar cocked Erlang's legs, covered his knees with his hands, looked at the sky, smiled and said, "I don't know the moon when I am young. He is called a white jade plate. Listen, my brother Bai is a child of a wealthy family when I was a child, otherwise where can I write such a verse, like me, and Pingan, a poor people like us, at least feel like a white bowl, a pie, and how can I say such a rich bastard, or a white jade plate?" Aunt Fong asked curiously, "Will Bai Yi be a sword repairman in this life?" The old scholar did not answer this question, but just smiled to himself. Whether he was a sword repairer or not, Bai had to wear a tiger hat before he reached his age. "It was okay when I was young, it looked cute, and it was still like that when I was young, isn't it just silly?" However, the old scholar thinks that this kind of whiteness is actually another kind of pride that I have never had before. My old talent adds another great beauty to the world. Aunt Fong smiled and said, earthly branch monks, although their temperament is not bad, but they are inevitably arrogant, and the eyes are above the top. This is good. I met you, a close disciple, and it was really hard. Nearly half of the cultivators who have almost beaten them will have a heart demon, and they deserve to be the hidden officer of the Great Wall of Sword Chi. She couldn't help but drank a sip of wine, as a celebration. Those little rascals, didn't they even look at her before? Although it is related to their ignorance of her identity, even if they do, they may not respect her how. Especially the sword repairer Yuan Huajing, whose heart is higher than the sky, in fact, for so many years, has been trying to kill A with the flying sword, Stop Spirit, which was renamed Yilang. The old Shutsai said, with the earthly branches, there will be heavenly stems, and there will be plans such as 28 stars. For example, on Bai Yujing's side, Dao's second child has been planning the 500 spiritual officials. The most important thing about this kind of thing is to fight for the first place. It is to occupy a certain one first, and it will form a kind of first hand of the great circle. For example, the monk of the earthly branch, the first one is like Chui Yang's first hand on the chessboard. Whoever makes this move will form an indestructible chessboard. If others want to imitate this move, it will be too late and will be rejected by the Tao. And this pioneer must be the reincarnation of A with numerology, and the threshold is extremely high. Aunt Fong hesitated for a moment, waved her sleeves, and a breeze swept across a fire temple. Then she said, Lu Chen set up a fortune-telling stall in Lizhu Cave. After all, I personally participated in the completion of the earthly branch. I have talked to Lu Chen and listened to him. Obviously, he had already counted Chui Yang's plan. It was just that when he mentioned it, he was rather absent-minded, saying, the poor Dao's skills are shallow and I dare not be the first in the world. I can only follow others. Behind his ass, draw a scoop according to the gourd, at most winning by quantity. Lu Qin said something strange to me when he arrived, saying that an accident given by Chui Yang was the real accident of the wild world. Later I learned that it was saying that Aquarius Island was blocking the wild world. The old scholar has weird eyes and complex complexion. Aunt Fong noticed the strangeness of the old scholar. Any other mysteries? The old scholar was drinking and not talking. When high of the wild world is thorough. Before he reached the sky, he chose the first hand for 10 days. After he went to the sky, the wild world immediately filled up 10 people. The key first was his close disciple, the Jiashan account clogs. Later Zhou Qingao stepped into the Jade Realm. Baya Pingzu, Dali State Master Cui Yun began to build the 12 earthly branches. After is the 28 stars of Bai Yujing's 3 masters. The first step is the younger brother of that generation of teachers and apprentices, with the name Shanqing. The former Haoran Jia Xing, and later Wen Hai Zhoumi, are the first to start the layout of the monastic years. Lu Qin might not have thought of this later than Zhoumi and Cui Yang, but even if he had thought of it early, he would definitely be unwilling to work because of his loose nature and tired temper. Aunt Fong said helplessly, Wen Sheng, don't be silent. The old scholar sighed, raised his hand, and pointed to his head. Cui Yang deliberately suppressed his mind many years ago, that is, deliberately lowered his chess power. When did he move his hand? When Aoliang returned to the Haoran world, it might be earlier. I don't even know what it means to be unconscious. Therefore, Cui Huang's soul separated out Cui Dongshan. Although he did have a plan, it was a layout of one continent. One of the links, but the biggest intention, is just a blind trick. You can fool yourself before you can deceive all the mountain monks in the world. So for Zhoumi and the entire wild world, this is the biggest accident. With this accident, there was a later accident. Do you really think that Zhoumi has no defense against Aquarius? How could it be possible? You have to know that the whole barren world's worst strategy is the best strategy of Zhou alone, since Zhou has long been on guard against Aquarius and the Dolly Court, especially the ascending platform in the Pearl Cave sky is even more a must-have thing, so how can Zhou not have an extremely meticulous calculation? The old scholar murmured, now that we are aggressively attacking the wilds, what are we lacking? Immortal money. Manpower and material resources. The strength of the mountain monks. No, these are the ones that we dominate. The only thing missing, the most lacking, it was such a big accident that Zhou couldn't even count. Aunt Feng was stunned. Cui Yang is sick, right? It's no wonder that in the Lizhu cave, Cui Dongshan, who was able to play the game with Jing Juzhong, and Qi Jingchen's master brothers, turned against each other, using the future younger brother as a chessboard. Cui Yun was always at a disadvantage. It's very interesting. It's interesting to see the boy with a mole on his eyebrows eating everywhere, falling and falling again. She stood by and watched the excitement. In fact, she was quite gloating. You didn't drink less at that time. As a result, your old talent is today. With me, is this actually the embroidered tiger deliberately? Then Qi Jingchen had already understood, just to cooperate with it. Well, you two brothers, when we are all fools. Aunt Feng slapped her head and shook her head vigorously and said, no, old scholar, you have said it yourself, it is his best strategy to reach the sky carefully. Cui Huang and Qi Jingchen, why don't they stop? Isn't it a deliberate plan? It ended up in vain. Field. The old scholar squinted his eyes and said, we have preserved Lixiaozu, Beiju Luzhou and Niazhao, so that the mountains and rivers of the 3 continents will not lose an inch, and the 8 continents have not been occupied by the wild world, and the Middle-earth continent is besieged. How many fewer people have we died in the world? In Aunt Feng's mouth, is it just a waste of work? Aunt Feng was horrified, and immediately got up and apologized. Wen Sheng, I was the one who failed to speak, is really this old talent who came to visit the door. He smiles and is not stingy. He is so friendly and approachable, so that Aunt Feng almost forgot about it. Wen Sheng has a few progeny, which temper is good. Cui Yang, the national teacher who once said, His Majesty the Emperor only needs to listen. After hitting the sword fairy embryo, in the Middle-earth divine continent, Lu Shilu, who once expelled the world's water descendants to flee in a hurry, just to survive. Forcing Qi Jingchen, the ancestor of the Lu family of Yin and Yang family, who almost couldn't solve it by himself. Or the disciple of the closed door who just cut off the head of the Empress Dowager Dolly not long ago. And the source of this trend is the old talent in front of him. The old scholar nodded and then blinked. I really don't know the reason. I'm known for only accepting apprentices and teaching. I'm not good at these rounds and corners. It's enough that blue is better than blue. Okay. My old talent is not good at it, but several of my students are very good at it. The first disciple, Shao Qi, the closed disciple. As for Zhua Zhua and Jun Qian, they are all fools who lack roots. You will only show up on the younger brother's side, looking for scolding, right? Dare to blame Mister for being partial? Of course not. Aunt Feng was really curious. She said, Master Wenxing, just a reminder, there will be a reward. For example, I am willing to help the Confucian Temple and take the initiative to do something in the wild world. As for merit, it is all counted. In the vein of Wenxing. The old scholar shook his head. Farewell, seniors don't need to be like this. I am ashamed for being ineffective. Our line is not good for this one. Aunt Feng sat back on the steps, raised her head and took a sip of wine, wiped her mouth and smiled bitterly. I dare not go back to the town because of what Wenxing said. I didn't think it was dangerous before, but it was more interesting. Now I start to feel panicked. Look at that year. A Lizhu cave sky, just like the landscape of mountains and rivers, just so little people. The teacher of the small town school, and the saint who once sat in the sky of Liju Cave, Qi Jingchen. Later, his nephew Cui Dongshan, or his former brother Cui Yang. Old sword strip under the bridge. One of the 5 highest, sword bearer. Back then, Aunt Feng and the others had actually mistakenly thought that she was just the sword spirit. Guan Xiu. Li Lu. God of fire, God of water. 5 to the highest 2. Pharmaceutical shop Old Man Yang, Qingtong Tianjun, Eastern Prince, holding one of the 2 old heavenly ascending platforms, was once the ancestor of the male earth immortal. Master Yao of Long Kiln. Mr. Sanshan Joho, master of magic and supernatural powers, master of the world talisman, alchemy. Fulu Street, Li Shixing, the first disciple of Taoist ancestors, is one of Bai Yujing master. Lu Chen, who sets up a stall, Qingming Tianxia, and Bai Yujing, the 3 head teachers. Shigue, the last real dragon in the world. Walking through the streets, carts selling candied haws, Zhou Zi, a yin and yang family who does everything in heaven. Aunt Feng, an old coachman, the ancestor of the Fulong family, the ancestor of the Lu family of the 5 elements family in the Middle-earth family. Li Er. Sheng Dafeng, the gatekeeper. Originally expected to break the barrier of heaven and become a of pure martial artist, Cui Qing. Fong Wang Song Changjing, who served as a kiln supervisor for a period of time. Blind Taoist Jia Xing, the dragon slasher 3,000 years ago. Guan Qiong, the first swordsmith in Aquarius. Tianjun Xieshi, whose ancestral home is in Taoya Lane, and Chao Shi, the sword fairy whose ancestral home is in Nipping Lane. Ning Yao, the first person in the colorful world today. Later, Baidi Qingjing Juzhong also appeared in the small town. Just imagine anyone who travels in a foreign country, who dares to make a mistake here, claiming to be invincible. Better than swordsmanship. Dao Fa. Martial arts. Supernatural power. Calculation. Regardless of whether you are a great monk in the Ascension realm, whether it is Nan Guangzhou who has been decapitated by criminal officer Hao Su, or the powerful ascension of Yi Xiu's background in Taoist name Qingmi, if you know in advance a little Liju Cave Sky, all the truth and the inside story of Chen Lingjun, it is estimated that they have to walk with soft legs, and they may not be as courageous as Chen Lingjun. In the small town, the older ones would never dare to provoke the slightest, but the younger ones would dare outsiders. In fact, I dare not. The youngest generation at that time, among them were Chen Ping'an, Lu Xianyang, Song Jisin, Ma Kuxuan, Li Baoping, Li Huai, Gu Kan, Xiao Yu, Lin Shi, Xia Ling, Sudian, Shi Shan. Looking back, even if it is the locals in the small town or the existence of Aunt Feng, being in it is actually the same situation as looking at flowers in the mist. Is there anything I dare not return to? I am not afraid of shadows when I am upright, and I have no ghosts in my heart, so I am not afraid of walking at night. The old scholar smiled and said, but then, it's really not like you, Aunt Feng. There are endless people in the world, and the time of my generation is limited. It may be because of this that we will cherish this travel in the world. The person who cultivates the Tao is no longer human. In the eyes of some people, the world is an empty city. This is not right. The old scholar stood up and planned to return to the Confucian temple. Of course, he did not forget to put the 2 jars of 100-flower brew into his sleeves and thanked Aunt Feng, but so that the master can be drunk and treat a foreign land as his hometown. Senior, it's a blessing in the world. Auntie Feng followed up and asked tentatively, Wen Sheng, don't you tell me the reason? The old scholar smiled and said, after listening so much, I'm replaced by my close disciple, and I already have the answer in my heart. Auntie Feng stretched out her hand to twist the colorful knots, and said angrily, "Wen Sheng, if you don't tell me, I will treat it like nothing." The old scholar smiled and shook his head, which was boring. Besides, I didn't take it seriously. As for the closed disciples, even more so. You are not the only one who is willing to destroy the flowers. Aunt Fong sighed and accepted her fate. 1 yard, 1 yard, I will send things. Wen Xing, don't worry, after taking care of Qin Pingan, he will only be regarded as a guest of honor when he travels to the Blessed Land. Maybe he will stay there for many years. It's not difficult for the Blessed Land to be a guest. For a year and 12 months, in Baiwafuti, there will be a high-ranking December flower god. Among these 12 flower gods, there will be the blessed flower master empress, and the 4 life masters who are in charge of the 4 seasons of flowers. The goddess of flowers, the 12 goddess of flowers, all have their own natal guest, and there is also the grand guest who is similar to the peony flower. Of course, Bai did not appreciate it and never visited the Blessed Land. Therefore, the imaginary title of Taishan Kiching cannot be taken seriously. It is mostly a sentimental act by the flower god. Moreover, the position of the Taishan Kiching of 100 flowers in the Blessed Land has been vacant for thousands of years. In fact, the Blessed Land is waiting for someone to be granted my and retrieve the colorful knot made from the lifeline of the flower god. The eyes of the old scholar brightened, and the predecessor was so kind to compare his heart to heart. It's just the answer, I still don't say it, suffocating you to death. Aunt Fong suddenly said, "Why don't I make a bet with Wen Qing? I've been drunk by me for so many years, but there is not much left. How about I bet that Qin Pingan can't give that answer?" The old celebrity came into interest and said, "What if the senior one? After all, the senior one is too big. In my opinion, it is simply a winning ticket, so there are only 10 altars of wine. Is it less?" Aunt Fong twitched, "Then 18 jars of wine. I only have 2 jars for myself. If I win, the knot will still be given to Qin Pingan, but after he becomes the grand guest, he must let December flower god come to my side to admit a mistake. If Qin Pingan gets the knot and travels to the 100 flowers, regardless of whether he is the grand guest, anyway, as long as he fails to let the flower god admit his mistake, he must promise me one thing, such as protect the flower-picking thieves on the mountain from being killed." The old scholar was shocked and said, "It is not appropriate to bet such a big bet." Aunt Fong smiled and said, "Forget it then." The old scholar rubbed his hands and said, "Follow it, just bet on it, and bet on it." Aunt Fong used her life's magical powers. From the long river of time, it seemed to pick up a stream, and then condensed into a breeze, and went to Qin Pingan at the entrance of the inn. Aunt Fong was about to speak. The old scholar took out a jug of wine from his sleeve, shook it, and said with confidence, "You won't lose, so it doesn't matter if I tell you the answer first." Aunt Fong still didn't know what to say. Later that wisp of breeze returned to the flower shed of the fire god temple. After hearing the words of her husband almost instantly, Qin Pingan gave the answer on the spot, saying only 4 words, which was actually Cui Yang back then in Shijianhu. "I said it a long time ago. Please enter the urn." Sort of Coming Chapter 841. Qin Pingan intends to ask the old monk Lu Ka for some landscape report, from this continent and other continents, the more the better. Never wanted to go to the alley, a young Hongyu temple official came. He took the initiative to find Qin Pingan, whose official rank is not high. He has just entered the Qinglu from the 9th grade, but temporarily leads the Beijing Temple Affairs Department and the point of reference. Officially, he is a cultivator of Taoism, watching the sea-level cultivation. He respectfully handed Qin Pingan a wooden official card, a spoof of Dolly Mandarin, with a hint of the local accent of Xuanzhou, saying that Si Qing personally ordered him to be responsible for connecting with Mr. Qin, and greet him whenever he has anything. Anytime. In addition to the official wooden plaque, a simple sword case carved with the word was also given. It was small and exquisite, but the size of a palm, and the young officials themselves had hidden the word D case, which was convenient for the two sides to fly swords to spread letters. The young man was named Xuanxiu, Fengshen Shui, and was born in the second class of Xinke. Nangxinfang is located on the right side of the Qianbu corridor. There are many yamen, and Honghu Temple is one of them. It is the neighbor of the Ministry of Industry and Administration where Guan Iran is located. Chen Pingan looked at the wooden official card, the front of which was Honghe Temple, Shuban. On the other hand, the official Chao Gong suspends this card. The unlicensed person is guilty according to the law, and the borrower sin the same. No need to go out of Beijing. A glance at the handwriting reveals the handwriting of the head of the Zhao family in Tianshui. In fact, the Jie Shiming, which is used by government officials and offices in a country, also came from the patriarch of the Zhao family. At first, Chen Pingan wondered how the Dali court sent a small official from the Honghu Temple to temporarily lead the repairs of the temple in the capital to follow him. Whether it was a young man's government, official rank, or monk state, it was actually inappropriate. After hearing the young man's name, he understood the thoughts hidden in the Dali imperial court. Xuanxiu was born in the Han nationality of the Dali clan. The key is that his student, Chao Sunny, was a close friend. When Jing took part in the test, he and Xuanxiu used to stay at the temples in the capital together. Two paupers, having fun in hardship, and reading leisurely, the two often went to the bookstores and shops with many cultural, recreational and antiques, but they couldn't buy them. On the side of Luopa Mountain, Chao Qingqing only mentioned Sun Chu for a group of officials and colleagues in the same year in the imperial examination, so Chen Pingan remembered the name of this student in the same year. If it is the last time he was thrown over there by the Saint of Rites, he was mistaken for an expert. Deng's disciple, who broke into the sect, was then taken revenge. It's not like that. Nailan Xianqiu, the founder of the mountain who likes to smoke, looked very good at talking, but in the end the first Dibao who revealed her name was Shanhaizong, most of which was implicated by Liang. Or was it because brother Cui Yang broke the heart of a fairy of Shanhaizong in his early years? Even with myself, the younger brother, was displeased at the same time. Suddenly there was a breeze, and I came to the book building. 12 altars of 100-flower stuff were dropped on the bookcase, and Aunt Feng's voice rang in the breeze. I made a bet with Wen Xing, am willing to give it to you. Send 12 jars of stuffed flowers. Chen Pingan asked. My husband left the Hushan temple. Aunt Feng replied, let's go. I helped send Wen Xing a scenic journey to the west coast of Aquarius Island. Chen Pingan thanked him and said with a smile, if Aunt Feng feels bad about the drinks, just bring back Bai Huanian, as a gift from the younger generation. Aunt Feng said, no, I still have 100 pots of stuffed rice, not bad for these 12 pots. Chen Pingan took it down, Bai Lai Tan. With more thoughts, Chen Pingan still put it on the newspapers of the official residences, lay on the table, and took out the pot of Baihua stuffed rice that had been opened in the Hushan temple, and a plate of salted soybeans. He watched with relish. Wei Lang, a member of the company capital engineering department named Li Chue, who is proficient in hydraulic engineering, drew a map of victory in the shape of a guide, but the project was huge, involving the diversion of several dotted vassal rivers, and the court had to send personnel to conduct field investigations. Some officials pointed out that the big wood in Yuzhang County, Hangzhou, is now too much demanded by the capital's teachers and relatives, so that the theft of giant wood can never be forbidden, so that there are often armed fights between officials and thieves. A 50-mile-long stream was found in the territory of Yunzhou under the domain of Huang Tinghua. It has not been named, and the water quality is very good. The water quality is very good. According to the inspection by the Qin Tianjin Kanyu Diocese, it is most likely to be a dragon palace site in the ancient Shu kingdom. Wuzhou's cocoons stand on the mountain, and the number of looms reached 1,200 at the end of last year, with an annual output of 30,000 horses. Whether the court can reconsider and set up a Ziluoyan here. An official of the Ministry of Rights named Wang Qinruo proposed to collect statistics on the genealogy and branch genealogy of a country, as well as the main shrines, branch shrines and branch shrines of ancestral halls in all states, counties and counties. Someone from the Ministry of War suggested abolishing part of the post, reducing the number of subordinates, avoiding redundant officials, and elaborated on the pros and cons of this move. After flipping the debao, Chen Pingan was in his sleeves, sitting in a chair with his eyes closed and rested, concentrating on one. With a grain of mustard seed, he began to tour the major Natalchi mansions in Zhao-Oxiandi. When I arrived at the water house, there were 2 painted pictures of rain master door gods with ambiguous faces posted at the door. They could be identified as a man and a woman. The villains in the green clothes saw Chen Ping and all of them were very excited and a little drunk. Yes, it's because Chen Pingan just drank a pot of 100-flour stuffed rice. Within the water mansion, there was another shower of rain. Chen Pingan smiled and greeted them and saw the big picture on the wall of the water mansion. The painting of blasphemy, the of the finishing touch, more and more, come to life, a painted mural, just like the true body of the god, because the road is hydrophilic. It was on the Sea of Clouds in the old Dragon City that year, refining the water seal, and later served as a fan Junmao of Zhou Nanhua Girl Mountain Monarch. She personally helped protect the road, because Chen Pingan accidentally found an extremely rare water lao, Tao Tong, during the refining process, which is the text composed by these green-clothed boys. It is a very wonderful Taoist art, which can be directly taught to direct disciples, as the inheritance of the ancestor hall of a hilltop fairy house, so that Fan Junmao mistakenly thought that Chen Pingan was the reincarnation of a rain master. Chen Pingan squatted beside the pond with both hands in sleeves. He smiled and said with a few older boys in green clothes, "At that time, we will make an appointment. Later, we will send you back to the Bio Palace where the goddess buried the river. As a result, it has been delayed for so long. Don't be surprised, next time the Luopa mountain sect chooses the location of Tonggishao, I will send you home." The boys in green are both happy and sad. After entering the Longmen realm in his early years, Chen Pingan refined the 2 ancient legacy swords traded by the Huawei Tianma into the 2 dragons in this Dragon Qiu pond, and the first water transport was condensed and manifested by the water pill. The Jiaolong was turned by Chen Pingan to be refined into a water transport Lizhu. In the end, besides the watermark of the water mansion and the map of Dedushui, a dragon pond pattern of double dragons was formed. Chen Pingan took out 2 jars of 100-flour stuff from his sleeves and placed them next to the pond that was temporarily Longqiu. He uncovered the red paper mud seal, 2 dragons, one black and one white, and their heads poked out from the water. Long Jishuizi began to drink, but they didn't seem to dare to look at the master Chen Pingan. Leaving the Shui mansion, Chen Pingan went to the mountain shrine and sprinkled the Wanyan soil used to seal the wine on the foot of the mountain, and gently tamped it with his hands. The mountains and rivers are dependent on each other, the floods form the abyss, and the dragons grow, and the soil forms the mountains. This is also why the ancestors of the ancestor of the ancestral hall, and the immortal master of genealogy, will try their best to make up the 5 elements that belong to the destiny. The 11 practitioners of the earthly branch and the same line are like this. This group of spiritual practice never sorrowful immortal money and heavenly treasure, the most critical piece of life is still a mountain treasure of semi-fairy rank. Just think of the old Longqing Fu family. In the early years, it was a wealthy continent, and it was a way of making money. After thousands of years of hard work, it was the family of 3.5 immortal soldiers. Chen Pingan planned to say hello to Ningyao at the inn, saying that he would stay at the house today to practice. He bypassed the desk and came to the door, tentatively shouting, "Ning Yao, can you hear me?" There is no verbal response from Ning Yao. Chen Pingon had to run to the inn, but as soon as he walked to the door of the house, he heard Ning Yao ask, "What's the matter?" Chen Pingon said, "I'll be here for now. Let's go to see Yuhong and Zhou Heijing's ring together tomorrow morning." Ning Yao said that there is no problem. Chen Pingon suddenly remembered that he wasn't staying here, so he could stay at the inn. I was a little sad, so I simply walked into the alley, went to the White Jade Dojo, and chatted with the pair of masters and apprentices. The young Zhao Duanming had just finished a big week and was practicing those spicy-eyed fist and foot poses. The monk was sitting on the futon. Chen Pingon squatted aside, and asked the boy for a handful of spiced peanuts. Lu Jia asked, "How come you have a relationship with Hongfu Temple?" Chen Pingon smiled and said, "I have a student named Xiao Sunny, have you heard of it?" Lu Jia thought for a while, that new subject. Chen Pingon said, "Chao Qingqing and the Xuanchu class of the Hongtong Temple were in the same year of the examination. When they went to Beijing to participate in the Chunwei test, they met each other and had a good relationship." Lu Jia asked puzzledly, "Your student, how can you just be the second best player, not the champion?" Chen Pingon didn't bother to talk nonsense, but squinted at the old monk, and dropped the peanut shell on the ground. Zhao Duanming shouted and punched, shouting, "Master, don't you know, I heard from my grandfather that Chao Banyan's imperial examination is full of talents and prosperity, let alone Chao Sunny and Yang Shuang. The second place and Tanhua are the top Maolin Langs in the second grade Jinshi. It is not difficult to get a champion if you put it aside." Lu Jia said casually, "There is a spring festival every 3 years in the capital. It is not surprising that there are 1 and 3 places every time. If you want me to see, since I haven't got a champion, it's better to take a look at the flower the youngest Jinshi. The two of them rode horseback to Beijing together, to show off. If I remember correctly, Yang Shuang was 18 years old, and that little guy was only 15 years old. How old was your student Chao Sunny then? Is it a crown?" Chen Pingon smiled and said, "Master Lu is this year." Lu Jia said with a smile, "If I participated in the imperial examinations when I was young, I would be the one to explore the flowers on horseback." Chen Pingon left this White Jade Dojo. Young said, "Master, that Chao Sunny is very powerful. My grandfather chatted privately with old friends from the Ministry of Rituals, and specifically mentioned him, and talked about the economics and military preparations." 1. The presidents of the 2 departments and more than a dozen room masters also deliberately gathered together to review the papers. Lu Jia smiled and said, "Nonsense, I don't know that Chao Sunny is not easy." The master deliberately responded to Chen Pingon. He is still not satisfied with Pei Qian as a disciple of the mountain. There is also a proud student who won the top spot in the exam, show something stinky with me. Zhao Duanming cautiously said, "Master, in the next night, your old man will be careful when walking at night. I heard Brother Qin said that Zhao Shilang of the criminal department was hung up on the tree." The old monk made his eyelids tremble, and threw a capital servant to hang on the tree. Lu Jia wondered, Zhao Yu of the Xing department? Isn't he a fellow of Chen Pingon? Besides, he is a scholar of the same culture. The relationship is very stiff. Not so. I heard you say before that Zhao Yu still took the initiative to look for him. Chen Pingon. This is a taboo thing in official circles. Zhao Duanming nodded and said, "Yes, they seem to have a good relationship, and the relationship between the uncle and the nephew is as familiar as the 2 of us and Brother Qin. So you have to be careful, master." Lu Jia said in a huff, "Why did you go?" The young man said aggrieved, "Master, you have just witty remarks, and there are words about needles hidden in the cotton." I listened very energetically, and I couldn't bear to interrupt. The old monk glanced at the side of the futon. He smiled and said, "Duanming, Minger, don't you want to go to the ring with Chao Jiugue? Take your brother Chen together to help occupy a good place." Zhao Duan knows his eyes and said, "Where brother Chen needs my help, he himself has an innocence card awarded by the Ministry of Justice for worship." The old monk complained, "It's a matter of mind at all, I don't understand this. You are still a bureaucrat, and you are stupid by Lei Pai." Zhao Duanming snorted, and continued to play the self-taught martial arts style. "I wonder if he can take a martial arts master like Yu Hong and Zhou Haijing with a punch and a half punch." The next day, near the Hushan Temple, a well-known mountain-top questioning boxing session was about to begin. The old shopkeeper of the inn originally wanted to talk to Chen Pingan and take his daughters together, so as not to be missed by the little thief or the slutty, but he never thought that his daughters would run away early in the morning. Most of them were with those friends. An appointment was made, and the old man had to give up. The news of this question of boxing actually began to spread throughout the streets of the capital a month earlier, so when it was close to the Hushan Temple, it originally only needed a stick of incense. Chen Pingan and Ning Yao walked a full half an hour. The crowds of people along the way, coupled with the small vendors who saw stitches on both sides of the road, made several nearby roads leading to the martial arts ground behind the Hushan Temple become more and more congested, with women screaming from time to time, or panic of losing something. There is a young man who has agile steps, like a fish swimming in the flow of people, whether it is the property of the common people or the young woman. Once he succeeds, he will disappear for a moment. Ning Yao began to regret that he had followed Chen Pingan to join in the fun. It was too noisy. Just such a distance, the disciples who tried to get closer were picked up by Chen Pingan. One of them was picked up by Chen Pingan. Chen Pingan smiled and squinted his wrists and pulled his toes to the ground. The pain immediately made his face pale with pain. Chen Pingan released his hand and patted the opponent's head. The latter became dizzy and immediately led people away. After a few times, there was no more people dare to come here to take advantage. These young men and women are those practicing family. On the road, a group of gangsters were smashed by a few government officials. They directly took the scabbard and slammed them on their heads. They fell to the ground with blood on their foreheads. They hugged their heads and squatted on the ground. There are also many sachets touched from women. Among them was an old government official who seemed to know one of the young men. He pulled him aside, glared at him, reprimanded a few words, and told the young man to leave immediately. All the others were taken to the county office by one of his subordinates. Yu Hong, gray-haired, burly stature, this old Zhuang dynasty martial artist, is said to be 150 years old and strong. He broke the border and reached the top of the mountain a few years ago. According to a designated route given by the Ministry of Justice in advance, the old master rose from a place south of the capital. The wind fell to the ground, and he appeared in the square behind the Hushan Temple in an instant, attracting waves of applause. As for Zhou Haijing, a female great master from a small country in the southwest coast, she still hasn't shown up yet. Before reaching the top of the mountain, Zhou Haijing was unknown and born as a fisherman by the sea, like the daughter of a fish market owner. 57 years old this year, but a young face in her early 20s, slender, and rumored to have a very good appearance. Today, most of the children of meritorious officials in the capital rushed to her. As for that Yu Hong, what can be seen? Look at the old man's tendon meat. At a place not far from the martial arts field, there was a carriage parked at the entrance of the alley. In the carriage, there was a young woman sitting cross-legged, breathing long and calm. She squeezed a piece of flour cake, named Fu Shouxiang, which is extremely popular in Beijing. One continent and 100 countries gather together in one city. The driver who drove for her was an extremely elegant and handsome man, wearing a snow-white robe, a green bamboo hanging on his waist, and a long sword, green pearl, on his back. The woman changed her hand and held the flour cake. Across the curtain, she and the coachman outside chuckled softly. I feel wrong that Mr. Su is the coachman. The man who was called by Zhou Haijing to drive Mr. Su was the sword fairy of green bamboo, Su Lang, who belonged to Songshi State in the central Aquarius Island. Not long ago, Su Lang had just closed his retreat and successfully entered the remote travel realm. Now he has secretly served as the second-class worship of the Dali Penal Department, and he and Zhou Haijing met in the rivers and lakes in the early years. Of course, Su Lang is a master of beauty. There are ideas, but one is intentional, the other is unintentional. This time Zhou Haijing is in Beijing to challenge Yu Hong, and Su Lang will do his best to be a landlord in public and private. Zhou Haijing put down the flour cake, and then picked up a vanity mirror, looking from left to right, looking very carefully. No matter how you look at it, she is a lovely woman, a peerless beauty. Then she showed a look of self-pity and self-sufficiency. She is really not young anymore, and she is still a man who doesn't like her. It's a pity that there is no one to ask if she should make up for beauty. Su Lang said, I wonder if Pei Qian will come over to watch the battle. Among the four great masters of Izhou whooping, Pei Qian ranked second, the youngest, and the best reputation. Zhou Haijing, in a goose-yellow dress, shook his head, and while lightly applying yellow stickers on his forehead, said, mostly, she will come, but she may hide her figure. It can be seen that Pei Qian is a person who doesn't like false names. Zhou Haijing glanced at the makeup box at his feet, frowned slightly. It was not easy to earn some dowry money. There are still a lot of chaos and distractions to fill in. There is no way, the opportunity is rare. There is no shop in this village, and there are many shops in Beijing, including silk and satin powder and hairpin jewelry. As for the family, they have negotiated the price early. If the contract is breached and anything is missing, it will have to lose a lot of money afterwards. Su Lang reminded, Yu Hong is here. Zhou Haijing hurriedly cleaned up, got up, bent down, raised the curtain, jumped out of the carriage, and she was full of jewels, not like a martial artist about to learn from others, but more like a rich woman who was used to hard days and suddenly became rich, so but all valuable objects that can be displayed are worn on the body, head and hands. Su Lang held back his laugh, looking really funny, but if he felt Zhou Haijing's fists were soft because of this, it would be a big mistake. Zhou Haijing was not in a hurry to take a long stature. She went to the martial arts field and stopped by the carriage. She cautiously supported a golden hairpin that looked like leaning out of the cliff and said, Don't laugh, Mr. Su didn't I don't know how difficult it is to make money through hard times. On the roof of a restaurant far away from the martial arts venue, the young Zhao Duanming stretched out his hand to strangle a man's neck and said annoyed, Chao Jiugui. This is what you call near the water tower, a treasured land of fengshui. Chao Gingxin, who had long since returned to the capital for promotion from Longzhou Kiln Affairs supervisor, patted the young man's arm and coughed, Tell me that you are a cultivator. At such a distance, isn't it a tiny difference? It's really clear. Besides, here's a wide field of vision, you have to admit it, don't you? Loosen it, and accidentally choke the court commander to death, which is a serious crime. Instead, Zhao Duanming increased his strength and said angrily, the dignified master magistrate in the capital, begged Grandpa to tell Grandma, and finally asked for such a position. Who was there before and slapped my chest and shook the sky and made trouble with me? Chao Gung tilted his heart, rolled his eyes, and drooped his head. Zhao Duanming quickly released his hand. Chao Gingxin straightened his waist immediately, took off the bright wine gourd around his waist, took a sip of wine, craned his neck, and looked at Zhou Haijing on the side of the carriage at the alley. He was so slim. Tremble, ready to come out, ordinary men, difficult to grasp. Chao Gingxin looked down a little, wiped his mouth, squinted his eyes, stretched out his fingers, and measured it from a distance. He said with emotion, "Sister Haijing, she is well known, and her legs are really long." Zhao Duanming glanced at Chao Jingxin's crotch. Chao Jingxin was just a normal line of sight, one big and one small, and he looked at each other with a sharp smile. It seemed that the other party's concentration was good, and he could still hold it. Chao Jingxin coughed, "Duanming, be more decent." Zhao Duanming sneered and said, "I heard my second aunt said that you were only in your early 10 years, and you began to secretly care about selling albums on Cheer Street in Qixiang. Ha, if you can't afford it, I heard that you can borrow it every day. Double one price." Chao Jingxin said with a smile, "Then your second aunt said that she was one of the oil bottles on the back of my and helped me walk through the door to cover up. She paid dividends. We did business in partnership. Every time before going back to each house, they would sit together on the blue bricks under the wall of the palace and count the money. Only your second sister had the brightest eyes, spitting and counting silver ingots, weighing silver ingots and gold ingots. I have to be skilled." Zhao Duanming was dumbfounded. "Can't it? The second aunt in the impression is a famous virtuous lady, one of the few ladies in Ichi Lane, and the early beggars have broken the threshold." However, Zhao Duanming also knew that, in fact, in her heart, for many years, like many women, she always secretly hid a drunkard, and then became estranged but only polite. Zhao Duanming couldn't figure it out. Why didn't the second aunts like that nerd Yuan Jingding, but they liked Chao Jingxin, a guy who was full of evil and notorious when he was young? Is it really that bad old saying that men are not bad and women do not love? The boy once heard from my grandfather that there were many elders in Ichi Lane and Cheer Street in the early years. They guarded against Chao's little thieves who did not do their jobs every day. Just like anti-thief, the most famous thing was that they were a little older than Chao Jingxin. The year-old Yuan's prostitute, who is Yuan Zhengding's relatives, somehow provoked Chao Jingxin when she was a child. As a result, Chao Jingxin, who was only 5 or 6 years old, went to block the door every day. As long as she went out, Chao Jingxin would take off her pants. So until now, there are still people of the same age who like to call Chao Jingxin Chao Thief. Zhao Duanming asked in his heart, "You won't ask me about Mr. Qin?" Chao Jingxin shook his head and smiled. "What to ask? What is the meaning? Even if you don't say a word, it is better than a face-to-face greeting." Zhao Duanming nodded, and asked a very curious question in Ichi Lane and Cheer Street, "Chao Jogui, why are you still bachelor when you are not young?" "My second aunt said you may be because you don't like women and you like men, so I haven't married for a long time." Chao Gong slapped his knees with anger, and said, "Good fellow, I said why my father and mother were separated from each other, so I asked me some weird words, what kind of temper my father, what a gentleman's style, all began to imply that I can go to the brothel to drink more flowers and wine. It turns out that it is the broken-mouth aunts, including your second aunt, who do not get the body and mind of my lover, so they abuse me secretly. I am too old, otherwise I have to as soon as they took off their pants." Guang Xier chased them and cursed. Zhao Duanming laughed and said, "Even if you take off your pants, Chao Jiugui, you may not see anything." Chao Gong said with emotion, "Today's Ichi Lane and Cheer Street are not as interesting as when I was a kid." Then Chao Jingxin touched the young man's head. "I haven't forgotten the old marriage of Lingzhou, winning this life and making it happy. You are still young and don't understand." Chao Jingxin suddenly turned to face the distance, and picked up the wine gourd. On the ridge of a roof, a man in a green shirt smiled and lifted the red wine gourd in his hand. It turned out that Chen Pingon discovered that he was on the ground, so don't even think about it. Many people came directly from home with benches and chairs, so it didn't matter whether they would reveal the identity of the fairy. Ning Yao passed away in a flash and came to the roof with a wide view. That Zhou Haijing, with a graceful figure, walked towards the martial arts field in a hurry, holding a pot of Xianjia wine from the mountain in her hand, and she drank as she walked. Ning Yao was a little surprised. Is this female master who is about to ask people to fight too much? Chen Ping'an only felt that he was eye-opening, but he could still make money like this. I can't learn it by myself. Zhou Heijing's dress, hairpin, cosmetic powder, hands shining, wine. She is like a moving golden sign, helping to attract business. Sure enough, in the flow of people, there are constantly shops proclaiming that such and such objects on Grand Master Zhou are from such and such shops. The Huishan Temple Martial Arts Field has set aside a fairy family's snail dojo. If you only look at the people in the dojo and confront the two sides, in the eyes of ordinary masters, they are as small as mustard seeds. Fortunately, they are leaning on a few mirrors in the Changchun Palace. The Dao Shui curtain stands all around, delicately visible. There is a mirror flower on the mountain, deliberately staying on Zhou Heijing's hair bun and dress for a long time, and the mirror flower in other places, deliberately or unintentionally aiming at the makeup and earrings of the great female master. Some of the storytellers who ate in the capital restaurant, especially solemnly, kept writing records of the female grandmaster, and the next two martial arts masters' tricks and actions were all true in the future. Gold and silver. Zhou Haijing threw the wine bottle to the ground. His mother's taste was really ordinary. She had to pretend to be drinking first-class wine. She was more tired than a dry stand. Then she swayed on her toes and landed in the martial arts arena. Yanran smiled, clasped her fist and said loudly, Zhou Haijing has seen Senior Yu. Yu Hong clasped his fists in return. Ning Yao asked, how about the outcome of this challenge? Chen Ping'an smiled and said, as far as it seems, Zhou Haijing still has a better chance of winning. The martial arts of the 9 realms of the two sides are about the same, but Zhou Haijing has a life and death spirit. Regardless of their respective killers, the odds of winning are roughly 6-4. While Yu Hong is rushing to win punches, Zhou Haijing is rushing to kill people. In fact, they are here high level of martial arts, fighting over and over, is to fight for a mentality, Fist knows how to do it, no one is in front of him. Ning Yao asked, how many punches can they carry if they are against you? Chen Ping'an smiled and said nothing, just drinking. Ning Yao said, I want to ask you something. Chen Ping'an had to answer honestly, if you really want to decide the outcome earlier, it's just a punch. Taking a sip of wine, Chen Ping'an watched the confrontation on the side of the martial arts field, but I really want to face me, even if I know my identity in advance. They both are willing to try it, so I'm still not as good as Chao Ci. If their opponent is Chao Ci, no matter how high-spirited he is, no matter how conceited he is in his martial arts and martial arts foundation, don't talk about no one in front of him. They are just like a mountain or a city in front of him. Hope to win. Ning Yao asked again, what if it is Pei Qian's 9 realms? Chen Ping'an thought for a while, and said, leave aside the relationship between master and student, 3 to 5 punches will be the winner, and 10 punches will be life and death. Suppose Song Changjing wants to challenge you. At the moment I am sure to lose. As for how to lose, it is hard to say if I have not played. Chen Ping'an suddenly said, 2 foreigners from Beiju Luzhou have arrived. They were all experts who Chen Ping'an knew them, and they didn't know themselves. Beiju Luzhou, female martial artist, embroidered woman. The other man monk once had a fight with her in Tori Mountain. Ning Yao glanced at the man and said, this person's previous 2 realms of immortality, greed and desire to chew, miscellaneous but not refined, and the height is limited. Even if he enters the Yupu realm, the bottleneck will still be relatively large afterwards. Chen Ping'an held sleeves in both hands, holding a wine gourd, and whispered, he was born in Yishou, it's impossible. You can only accept what God gives, for fear of missing a little bit. People like Song Su and Han Zhoujin, who practiced a path of cultivation, are not ordinary lucky. They are much exaggerated than the ancestral biography of the ancestor of the ancestor. They have the foundation of their own qualifications and talents and understanding. They are already excellent. Chi practitioners, the refining of the 5 elements belong to the destiny, and the opening of the mountain Chi residences other than the princes are extremely particular and fit their own numerology. Everyone has different talents, especially those who are born with something different from common sense. The natal supernatural powers, and everyone has the treasures of the immortal family, plus a group of preachers, all are high-ranking people with supernatural powers. I dare to say that I don't take detours, but this genius of monasticism, carefully cultivated by Dolly, did not take any detours. There were fierce battles and hardships. The Tao heart was polished to be close to flawless, no matter if it was against people. Fighting together, or jointly beheading to kill the enemy, are all experienced, so they act sophisticated and have a firm mind. As long as they are steadily beaten by them, step by step to the upper 5 levels, on this Aquarius mountain, everyone is destined to shine. Once the last term is made up, the 12 will join forces, and within 100 years, it will be like an imitation by Yujing walking by a big Li. Maybe there will be a chance to kill a great monk in the ascending state, but of course it is the ascending state of the Nongguang group. As for the ascending state of Dao No Qing's secret, even if the Earth branch can win, it is still difficult to kill. The appearance of Qin Pingan and the 3 battles in succession are, to a certain extent, more like filling up the vacancy, helping the monks of the earthly branch and repairing the last flaws in their respective Dao Axin. Qin Pingan pointed to the sachet hanging on Zhou Heijing's waist and explained, "This sachet is mostly her own belongings and has nothing to do with business. Because according to the customs of the seaside fishermen of her vassal country, she wears it as a woman." A silk sachet embroidered with a swallow pattern flower letter period is used by a woman to tie her body after marrying a woman to show that she belongs to her body and mind. Ning Yao nodded, "This custom is quite interesting." Chen Pingan whispered, "I'm actually thinking about one day in the future, after visiting Zhongtu Shenzhou and Qingming Tianxia, I personally wrote a book similar to Shanhai Zizi, which specifically introduces the local customs and customs, regardless of the details." He wrote a multi-million character masterpiece, not selling on the mountain, but specializing in the business under the mountain, mixed with some hearsay landscape stories. It is estimated that it will be better than any legend, small profits but quick turnover, and fine water flow. Ning Yao lifted his chin and clicked on the woman who was dressed in powdery clothes. "You can do business in partnership." Chen Pingan smiled and said, "Forget it, I don't care to watch this questioning punch." Chen Pingan moved the position, "Don't keep the sword gored around his waist," and leaned back, resting his head on Ning Yao's lap, and said, "Tell me after the fight and take you to the restaurant." Closing his eyes, Chen Pingan actually started to doze off and fell asleep. Song Jisun left the residence of the accompanying capital and took a trip to imitate Bai Yujing. After that, the capitals first sent a letter to the Dali Palace and the Ministry of Ritual by Feijian, and then Song Jisun took a border army ferry to the capital. According to Dallas laws, it was not a matter of random for the kings to enter Beijing. It was because Song Mu had the most authority among the kings and had more restrictions. What's more, the current Dali accompanying capital and the capital were vaguely facing north and south. On the way to the north of the ferry, I received a reply from the Emperor Dali, and asked Song Mu to lead the mountain ferries to go to the wild world and meet the Emperor. In fact, this secret decree, His Majesty only meant that you, Song Mu, must not enter Beijing without authorization. After Song Jisun received this secret letter, he just didn't see it, and continued to go north to the capital. The king Song Mu was not suitable for entering Beijing, but as a son, he had to go this way, even if he and Chen Pingan were completely torn apart. Song Jisun must prevent the worst result from appearing. Standing next to him was the maid, Jigue, and she asked, "Really? You are careful to turn against the emperor before turning your face with Qin Pingan?" Song Jisun nodded, his eyes resolutely said, "There are always things that make people have no choice." In the Qingming world, Dakshuandu observes. There is a young Taoist priest with a lotus crown on his head, his hands are on the outer wall, his head is stuck out, his feet are hanging in the air, his neck is stretched and he looks inside. An old Taoist priest appeared inside the wall out of thin air and smiled and said, "Don't look, you can't pick up to eat. If you really want to eat it, it's warm, I will take you to eat ready-made." After all, there are still some young Taoists who have just practiced, so in their Taoist temples, there are still latrines, so I don't know if this guest will be full. Guests visiting the door must be courteous and courteous. The young Taoist priest shook his head, "Forget it, I'm not hungry right now." An old master of the great Xuandu temple. Abai Yujing's three masters. When the two parties met and chatted, they had always been so ethereal. Dao Chang's son asked, "Since you are not busy with business, what are you doing here?" Lu Qin smiled hippily, "Guess." Son Dao Chang said solemnly, "I don't guess." Lu Qin said, "I'm not looking at the movement here, so I ran over to congratulate the old master." Ruins of Jinchi Great Wall. Jian Xiu was infatuated all his life, and women came to the top of the city. Always alone around, now it seems that there are two more followers around him, Wei Jin, Fairyland Jinshu, Chao Jun, Yuanyingjing Bottleneck Jinshu. The three of them were on the top of the city, separated by a distance, practicing their own practices. The two large and small thatched huts on the front of the city have long been gone, but it seems that no one wants to restore the scene. There are more and more Haoran monks visiting here. Everyone has been reminded by the elders of the division, and it is the kind of repeated admonitions, so no one dared to approach the three swordsmen. In fact, they did not dare to approach the left and right. The elder Jianxian threw a sword book to Wei Jin in his early years, as if only waiting for Wei Jin to return to the Great Wall of Sword Qi. In Chao Jun's Heart Lake, the lake was full of withered lotus in the past, and now there are 10,000 green lotus. When Chao Jun practiced swords in his spare time, he and the Confucian sages who lived here often borrowed the Shanshui Dibao from the divine continent of the Middle Earth to play a bright shadow. Chao Jun chatted with the great sword fairy of Fengshua Temple today. "If I came here early to practice swordsmanship, how many opportunities can I get with my qualifications?" Drinking wine in the Wei and Jin dynasties, qualification is the next thing, and it depends more on whether the character fits. In Chao Jun's opinion, he obtained a sword book here. He used to practice swords after returning home. He was a dignified swordsman and the first person in Aquarius swordsmanship. As a result, he almost practiced himself into a fall. Genius. According to Mr. Zhua, the study of swordsmanship in the Wei and Jin dynasties is actually equivalent to a questioning of swords. If you change to Chao Jun to read the swordsmanship, it will not hurt. Anyway, you can't understand it and you can't learn it because of the qualifications of the sword. Nothing. Chao Jun had some doubts at the time. Did Mr. Zhua not learn more swordsmanship by the way? The answer from the left and right is very simple, the sword score rank is very high, but he does not need it. Suddenly stood up today and squinted. In the far south. Alien pulled Yi Xiu Qingmi, and he had penetrated into the hinterland of the wild world, but he didn't fight a single fight from start to finish. On this day, Liang suddenly said, "Feng Xuetao, you can go back." Feng Xuetao was silent. "I was reluctant to be dragged here before, let alone go, even if it is running, as long as it can run, I will run back to Haoran and hide." Now I didn't even think about following Liang to make any feats of cutting through the wild, just didn't want to go so much, as long as he had no worries about his life, walk a few steps south as much as possible. Even if he fell for one level, as long as he could return to Howrah alive, it seemed to be nothing. Liang snorted, no waste, spit on the palm of his hand, stroked his forehead and temples, no. Good guy, addicted to eating and drinking. Go away, don't stay here and drag me. Feng Shuatao said, I'm in an ascendant state anyway, so it's not difficult to protect myself. Liang narrowed his expression and shook his head, I was wrong, your enemy is not the great demon in the wild world, it is me. So it is difficult. Feng Shuatao was stunned. Liang looked around and said, I will put all my strength into swords later. I am worried that I will hurt you by accident. What is it that is not holding me back? Get out of here. One south and one north, 2 swordsmen of the world. The highest swordsman in the world, Liang. The highest swordsmanship in the world, right and left. About to join forces to make a sword. Sword of Coming Chapter 842. Ning Yao said, this Zhou Haijing played very well. For a while, the fist is like breaking a willow, and the hand is like holding a flower for a while, and the figure flutters like a colorful cloud. In Ning Yao's view, when a martial artist fights, you punch me and kick me. In fact, it is more exciting than practicing qi shi on the mountain. As for swordsmanship, it is actually very boring. Compared with Zhou Haijing, who is fancy punching and quick posture, Yu Hong's fists and feet appear to be open and close, his fists are strong, his qi is like a few dragons hovering around, and Zhou Haijing's hands have been achieved several times. Had already smashed the female grandmaster's hand and a few hairpins. Those who watched the battle, especially those of Gongqing who cared about Qixiang and Cheer Street, could not lift their heads. When they saw Zhou Haijing hit the fish and rainbow with the back of his foot, the momentum sank so hard that Yu Hong moved horizontally 10 feet away in the martial arts field by kicking it. For a while, everyone shouted and applauded. Yu Hong stood still and patted his clothes. A blood trough appeared on his cheeks, slowly oozing blood. It was a small injury that Zhou Haijing had previously scratched with a hand knife. This young auntie, her hands are really black. Previously, the hand knife was like a rainbow, and it seemed to cut the neck straight. It was all an illusion. Assassin, it was her thumb that actually pulled out, trying to dig out one of Yu Hong's eyeballs. Yu Hong didn't hesitate at the time, and kicked Zhou Haijing's abdomen. In order to relieve his strength, the latter had to take a step back so as not to be stepped through his body. Otherwise, if he changed his hands this time, Yu Hong would use one. For the price of the eyes, I killed a mountain-level martial artist. Chen Pingan was still closing his eyes and meditating, listening to the sound of the fist. For the end martial artist who was on the first floor of the return, it was not difficult at all. He explained to Ning Yao softly, Zhou Haijing is fishing, less than half of the incense stick, deliberately 6 different methods of boxing were used, and the 17 strokes were all learned from others. They win in the skillful strokes of the boxing, and lose in the skills are superficial, overly complex, and inadequate, because they are not Zhou Haijing's own real boxing methods. She doesn't tell Yu Hong the level of strength everywhere, plus the hand knife at the top, most of it is to make Yu Hong continue to deepen the impression in her heart, Zhou Haijing is a female martial artist. I guess I wait until Yu Hong is the first. The second time she took her breath, it was when Zhou Haijing was deciding the victory or defeat with him. One accident was that she traded Yu Hong's life with a serious injury. Ning Yao doubted, both sides have hatred. Chen Pingan thought for a while, it's hard to say, some martial idiots just like to separate life and death in order to strengthen martial arts. For example, the old cook in Luopashan. Zhou Haijing held a few orbs in his hands, exerted lightly, and creaked. Before being affected by Yu Hong's fist, the rope was broken, and most of the beads were scattered on the ground. She smiled sweetly, yes, old waist is always strong, no wonder it's open branches and leaves, many children and grandchildren. This trip to Beijing, I heard that the old Zhuang dynasty, your fish surnamed Wufu, majestic and powerful, fist half a country. The spectators burst out laughing. Yu Hong frowned slightly and said, Wufu martial arts, stop talking nonsense. Zhou Haijing raised his hand and let go of his fist. Several beads were pinched into a ball of powder, and fluttered in the wind. She clasped her fists high and smiled. It can be regarded as a blind medicinal material to prolong life, and women can use it as a powder to apply face. My wife, the shop has to add money. Yu Hong had a vaguely angry expression. Wufu learning from each other is not a child's play. Zhou Haijing, you are learning martial arts together, and your breakthrough is so smooth that you disrespect martial arts so much. Today, the old man will teach you how to be a pure martial artist. Zhou Haijing patted his palms. Don't teach me how to be a woman. The whistle sounded one after another. Yu Hong sneered and said, Speech, what kind of pure martial arts? Then the old man will not be polite with you. If you accidentally beat your mountain, remember not to blame the sky, you asked for it. Ning Yao smiled, bent his fingers, and tapped someone's forehead lightly. Chen Ping'an said helplessly, I am not Ma Kuxuan. I fight with people, especially Wen Quan. I rarely chat. Zhou Haijing pretended to be horrified, patted his heart, and swayed. I saw this scene of amorous feelings. I don't know how many vagrants and Deng's disciples screamed in the audience. On the other roof, Zhao Duanming suddenly looked at one place. The young man was shocked. He pulled Chao Jengson's sleeve and said in his heart, Chao Zhougue, Your Majesty and Empress are here. Yu Hong and Sister Zhou are so great. It's enough for the ancestors of the ancestors. As expected, it's better to learn boxing. Let's practice the fighters to fight. How can Your Majesty take a look? Chao Gingxin didn't look at the place where the boy could see, but just stared at the wonderful question box in the snail dojo. When Sister Zhou stood still, her legs were already very long. When she asked people about boxing, she was heroic. Sa Shuang, when he whips his legs, Chao Gingxin can't wait to push the old man away, let himself carry a leg, and remind the young man, take care of your eyes. You shouldn't look at things. If you can't help but not look, it's just cultivating your heart. Zhao Duanming retracted his gaze and laughed angrily. You can manage your mouth if you have the ability, don't drink. Chao Gingxin took a sip of the drink and smiled and said, I just want to use the drink to block my mouth. Drinking is slightly dim, and looking at the flowers in the fog is more beautiful. A pair of graceful couples, young faces, and a little girl by their side. The three of them just took their seats and sat by the window of a restaurant outside the martial arts venue. There were some melon and fruit snacks on the table. There were several tables nearby. It was enshrined by the imperial family of Dali, who had performed blindfolding techniques. The three at the main table were Emperor Song He, Queen Yu Mian, and Yu Yu, a military monk from the earthly branch. It's just that Song Su, the prince, did not show up. The restaurant did not clear the venue to rush people. Girl-year-old Yu Yu, she is not low in the Yu family of Shangzhou Kingdom, and is one generation higher than Yu Mian. Therefore, if the empress is going home to save her relatives, she must call her aunt when she sees a girl. In the Ao Pingzhou countries other than Dei, according to court regulations, almost all the queens could not go home to save their relatives, but the Song family of Dei was always lenient in such matters, regardless of when Nanzhan returned to Yuzhang County. Or Yu Mian went out of the palace twice to Yiqi Lane, and the Ministry of Rites had no objection. Yu Yu was stealing wine in front of His Majesty the Emperor, stealing one pot after another. After stealing those pots, the taste was light but better than the long aftertaste of the Changchun Palace wine. The girl began to stare at the pots of immortals on the table next door. Home tea, as a errand, can't drink alcohol, but drink the first-class tea. Ning Yao said, you guessed it wrong. Zhou Haijing didn't seem to think about splitting life and death with Yu Hong, and she still had a sense of action. Could it be that she already knew that she would become the last monk in the earthly branch? In this questioning punch, the two sides actually hit 2 sticks of incense, nearly half an hour, and finally Zhou Haijing lost a move, and neither side of the questioning punch was seriously injured. Yu Hong holds his fists and respects the quartet. Zhou Haijing stretched out his hand to cover his cheek, and spit out a mouthful of blood towards the ground, arousing pity. She was hit in the cheek with a punch by Yu Hong, and when she was staggered, Yu Hong tapped her back with an elbow. If he is ruthless, Zhou Haijing will fall into a state if he is not dead. Zhou Haijing showed a smile. After I recover from the injury, can I ask Senior Yu for advice or two? Broken pots and sold iron beforehand, and both borrowed a lot of fairy money from Su Lang, betting that they would lose and make a lot of money. Yu Hong nodded and said, whatever. Chen Pingon sat up, squinted, looked at the woman Wu Fu who didn't care about the outcome, and said to Ningyao Axayan, it is roughly certain. Zhou Haijing and Yu Hong have a life and death feud. Maybe it was just killing a Yu Hong. Unhate. Chen Pingon suddenly turned his head and looked towards the hanging mountain and Jialongu in the past, his face pale. Ningyao asked, who has taken the shot over the barren world? Aliang. Left and right. Because of the dual relationship between Hedao Jianqi Great Wall and being overwhelmed by the wild world, Chen Pingon noticed a hint. Chen Ping'an took a deep breath, and said in a deep voice, the two joined hands. Ningyao didn't need to think about anything, and said straightforwardly, can you roughly determine the location of the battlefield? I can use my sword to open the sky, first return to the colorful world, and then rush to the wild battlefield. However, Ningyao knew very well that even if he was in time, he might not be able to help. Once Tuo Yushan's plan had already included himself, he might have been unhelpful. Chen Pingon shook his head and suddenly laughed, we have to trust Liang and brother. Liang and the left and right joint out swords. Probably it was like the boss sword fairy Qin Qingdu went out of the city to fight, and put all his strength in the sword. To make up for a big regret for the world. A siege carefully arranged in the wild world. The mountains and rivers are broken, the earth is cracked, and the aura is disordered, and a group of ambushes and hides have nowhere to hide. The wild great demon who first appeared, is Wenhei's careful disciple of the mountain pioneer, one of the new thrones, the sword immortal Shouqin, single-eyed, back sword box, hidden 6 swords, and a green robe banana refining. Shouqin is one of the 2 newest ascending sword repairmen in the wild world after the war ended, and the other one is a remarkable one who has become a co-lord of the world in one fell swoop. Shouqin looked dignified, even if his side occupied the right time and place, but he did not take it lightly. Shouqin looked at the 4 swords hanging on his waist, Liang, this frame anyone could die. Immediately after Shouqin, there was a female fairyland demon from Tuyueshan, who was named Xinzhuang, a direct disciple of Tuyueshan ancestor, who had been acquainted with Liang for many years, and was a bottleneck in fairyland. In the small world big formation, her combat power can be regarded as an ascendant monk. A large formation appeared at the feet of the 2, like 2 yin and yang fish, one black and one white, tangling each other. Shouqin and Xayan Zhuang just stood on top of the yin and yang fish, hanging in the air, rotating with the formation. The big array is very simple, just a yin and one yang double fish diagram, not to make more appearances. However, the atmosphere of the Great Tao is extremely mysterious and vast, like the authentic legal tradition of the Great Tao between heaven and earth to Jian. Xayan Zhuang sighed faintly, looking at the man who knows the sky is high and thick, and who wants to go southward into the barren hinterland, whispered softly, Liang, you shouldn't provoke a world like this. The 10,000 years of confrontation between the barren world and the Great Wall of Sword Chi, the Ascended Realm Great Demon is difficult to be killed, and the Ascended Realm Sword Repair is even harder to die. On the left-hand side of Aoliang, 200 miles away, an old mountain-moving ape who steps on a flying sword and carries a long stick on his shoulders presses down a hill under his feet with magical powers, so as not to be broken by Aoliang's sword intent. This old demon of the old throne, whose real name is Zhu Wei, grinned and said with a grin, "You shit, since you are tired and crooked, Grandpa will give you a ride today and go with that Dong Sanging to be a companion." Unfortunately not. 14 realms, otherwise Grandpa will be more credited. Hundreds of miles to the right of Aoliang, there is an ascendant demon official lane with hairy brows and white robes. It is also one of the new thrones. It has already used magical powers to twist and connect a river for hundreds of miles. The final detention is a pocket futon. Guan Xiang and Na Aoliang laughed loudly and said, "Brother Aoliang, the style is not diminished back then, but this time it seems hard to be slipped away by you, otherwise, you can help me give a word to the hermit." What I said is still true. It was to persuade the young hidden official to turn to the wild, marry the little girl of his family, and become one of the new thrones without any suspense. The ranking is destined to be extremely high. Guanxiang is willing to take the initiative to let the virtuous people become the head of the family. The territory of the mountains and rivers under the jurisdiction of Xiang Yimai is no less than a continent of mountains and rivers in the vast world. One day, when Chen Pingan is among the 14 realms of sword repair, he may be able to share the world with Firen. Liang raised a remotely. This old man in Guanxiang has less foresight than the old blind man. Who looks more handsome with Chen Pingan and has no points? Di Yaoguan Ali raised his hand and detained a ray of sword intent from his side, lingering around his fingertips. Unexpectedly there was a vision of lightning and thunder. Farther away, there was a rider, riding a horse in the clouds, wearing golden armor, holding a gun, covered in armor, and no real appearance. There were 2 small and exquisite meteor hammers hanging from his waist, one bright red and one pitch black. The demon female cultivator with a great Taoist name stands beside this rider. She is slender and looks like a Taoist female crown, wearing a fishtail crown. Wearing the yellow and purple Taoist robe, holding a whisk in his hand, there is a round moon in the back. Although these 2 are both immortal realm cultivation bases, no matter whether they are in the Summer Palace or the Middle-earth Confucian Temple, they are all listed as must-kill targets. There are only 3 monster monks who have won this honor, together with the ministers. Liang looked around, his eyes were dull, and after holding back for a long time, he suffocated a depressed speech. "It's miserable. It seems that today's battle was lost to Bai Yi. It's really a way to teach people to beat their chests and feet." Fuyazhou besieged and killed Bai Yi. There were so many thrones and monsters that could not be counted with one hand, and all of them were old thrones in the wild world, without any moisture. Sure enough, after falling from the 14th stage, he will be looked down upon. Before I was ascended to heaven, I made a special trip to say something strange with my own yin and yang. Brother Aoliang, don't be sad, you just treat our 2 realms interchanged, don't lose. When I succeed in harmony, remember to come to heaven to congratulate. I must to make the feat that I was thinking of when I was young, to refine inha to make fermented rice, and good wine was enough. The wild top combat power who temporarily appeared on the battlefield, there are only these 6 in the eyes. The old ancestor of the genus of moving mountains in the world, Zhu Wei, is the pinnacle of the ascent. Among the old thrones, this old ancestor of moving mountains is actually considered outstanding. Make do. Shouchen, a newly promoted ascendant sword repairer. Okay. Is still young after all, and belongs to the junior in the ascending realm sword repair. No matter how talented in sword practice, he still can't make up for the innate defects of insufficient realm fighting. Guan Ali, the Ascended Realm Great Demon who ranks on the new throne, is an old enemy of the Great Wall of Sword Qi. Is even an old acquaintance of Liang. The old guy doesn't seem to be good at all except for his loud voice and funny speech. Tuo Yuashan Xinzhuang is a formation master, but his fist skills are quite good, and he can be regarded as a boundless martial artist. As for the golden-armored knight riding a horse in the cloud, his avenues and feat are extremely obscure. There is no record of the Jiazi account, let alone the real name of the big demon, even a pseudonym. Female Crown Catkin, it is rumored that she is the mountain Taoist companion of Huang Wuan of the Old Throne, but in fact it is Huang Wuan's remnant of the road of killing the three corpses, half of the appearance of the outer demon. If she puts aside her endless magic weapons, the combat power is not too great high, is extremely difficult to kill. After the great demon Huang Wuan was eaten by Zhou Mi, many of the secret treasures were thrown by Zhou Mi to the Catkins before reaching the sky, which was regarded as returning to the original owner. These three put together a bunch, the combat power can barely be regarded as two Ascended Realm monks. So in Liang's eyes, there are roughly only 5 soarings. Liang gently touched the ground with his toes, pressed his thumb against the hilt, and the long sword was out of its sheath. He glanced down at the borrowed long swords and smiled and said, "No, rest assured, you will never be wronged. To kill me, Liang. Especially when he is a sword repairman who starts to saber right away. There is definitely not only this point. It's not that there are not enough great monsters on the paper, but the true backbone of the Abbot siege today, Shouqin. That's too much meaning." Wandering alone in the wilderness in his early years, a series of ascended great demon followed his ass. Before, Liang deliberately walked to the edge of the hidden big formation before he stopped, and then let Feng Shuatao leave and let this Shanzi Yeshio return to the Great Wall of Jinqi alone. It is not easy for a wild Xiao who is most afraid of death and cherishes his life. It is not easy to follow him to this point, especially when Feng Shuatao feels that he can try to stay, Alien feels that it is enough. Of course, Feng Shuatao has to live well, return to the world, and brag about this battle for me. Don't hide and fight anymore. It's just that it's boring to see how boring people are in fighting, so it's better to end up gambling yourself. When Liang pushed his sword out of its sheath, within 3,000 miles of a larger area, all the mountains collapsed, the dust covered the sky and the sun, and all the flowing water was shattered by the fine sword intent, and there was no water transport at all. Exhausted water and dust are mixed together, and within the territory of 3,000 miles of mountains and rivers, it is like a torrent of mud that is descending quickly. The sword intent crisscrossed in the rain curtain, and the earth was densely covered with ravines. There was no mountain, a stream, or a plant of vegetation, all turned into powder in an instant. Even the top of the mountain under the foot of the old ancestor who moved the mountain was completely shattered. Zhu Wei waved his long stick and drew a circle of arcs to disperse the surging sword intent around him. Liang of this dog day, it's not the 14th realm sword repair. Besieged and killed by Yi, this ancestor who moved to the mountain still has lingering fears. At that time, it was fortunate that the 14th realm Baya was not a sword repairman. The large formation rotates, and the Shouqin and Xinzhuang hovering above the 2 swimming fish in black and white do not need to cast spells. They have a formation to help wear out that sword intent, and the large array collides with the sword intent. Agitated for bursts of glazed time ripples. Shouqin squinted his eyes to observe the trajectory of the sword intent, and shook his head after a while, unable to find the slightest kendo flaw. The biggest reliance of sword repair is the ultimate lethal power of one sword to break through 10,000 laws. No matter what kind of person you are cultivating, and what magical powers you have, just one sword breaks it. However, it is difficult for Jian Xiao to take care of his personal superiority and large-scale damage on the battlefield. This is why Wu Qingpei, who is not good at fighting with others, is only a jade sword, whose life is listed as the first-class flying sword by the Summer Palace. Swordsmanship in the pure realm, however, can become the first choice for the great demon in the wild world to be beheaded as soon as possible. It is difficult to have the best of both worlds. Sword repairs and natal flying swords, who are born to be suitable for the battlefield, are often not good at fighting each other between swords, and a sword repairer on the battlefield of the mountain, even if the sword is very alive and the sword intent is extremely heavy, but there are pros and cons. The advantage is that you are not afraid of encirclement, and the disadvantage is that if you are not careful, you will be caught by the enemy's mountain monks, and use the technique of avenue deduction to find a certain avenue omission. A liang is a big exception. Whether it is catching a rival or being trapped in a siege. This daunting Howran sword repairman, a swordsman who is least like a scholar, is almost invincible. The so-called near is because there was the old sword immortal sitting on the city head before, and by Yujing had the invincible Dao's second child, because Yu Dou had one of the 4 more immortal swords, Dao Zong. Tai Bai, Wanfa, Taoism, Naive. It is recognized by the mountain top that these 4 fairy swords that have killed countless ancient monsters and gods, as long as they are obtained by Liang, or a handy sword with a rank close to the rank by Liang, they are hard to kill and not lose. Bai is the most proud of the world. The Yaoguan Ali laughed, and the futon at his feet cracked open, breaking the sword intent. The golden-armored knight slightly grasped the spear in his hand, and the ancient armor on his body was shining brightly. The mount gently stepped on the void, and under the horse's hoof, circles of water ripples rippling in all directions. The knight asked heartily, "Do we need so many people to participate in the siege? You really want to fight for help?" "People." Catkin smiled, and she continued to shake the whisk in her hand, breaking up the afterglow of the sword intent within a radius of several miles, and expelling it slightly outside. It was really troublesome. Within 1,000 miles, the sword intent was quietly circulating everywhere. One's own attacking magic weapons, magic powers, Shudashan and certain escape techniques, when used, will be very troublesome, and it will become easier to reveal clues. Even so, there is still no one who wants to be that early bird, taking the lead in showing the kind of magical powers that move mountains and seas and replace small worlds, and transfer this sword intent to another place. I never thought that a person's sword intent poured out into the world, and it could be counted by 2 caddies, and it was hundreds of caddies, more than 1,000 caddies. I really don't say the least. The ride next to Catkin was born out of the sky. Even she didn't know the other side's avenue inheritance. The latter had no experience of confronting alien on the battlefield, at most it was the previous offensive and defensive battle of the Great Wall of Sword Chi. Watching the battle, I saw Liang's fall from the sky, and the majestic questioning sword with Lu Cha afterwards. She had to patiently explain, winning or repelling Liang, and keeping or beheading Liang are completely different things. Not everyone can exchange punches with Dao's second child. Liang has 2 things. The thing that makes the mountain cultivator fear the most. One thing is that he is not afraid of besieged and is good at singles out a group. Besides, so far, no one knows the magical powers of his natal flying sword. Speaking of this, Siyu glanced in a direction in the distance, and whispered, "As for Tuiua Mountain, is there any plan to encircle and fight for aid, maybe?" Liang suddenly withdrew from the previous posture of about to pull the sword out of the sheath. One jumped gently, the golden rooster was independent, shook his legs, changed legs and shook again. The 10 fingers are staggered across the chest, and both hands and arms are undulating like water. The golden armor knight muttered, "This virtue is really annoying." Small smiled and said, "It's good to get used to it. When the fight really starts, it will be ignored." Sure enough, 2 more groups of people behind the scenes appeared in the distance, one after another. A thin old man with a cane with sunken cheeks, this 14th realm great monk, the creator of the Hall of Valor in the wild world. This is an alien from outside, who hasn't appeared in the previous wars. It wasn't until the confrontation between the two worlds that he appeared in Tuition, very long overdue. According to the secret records of the Summer Palace and the Confucian Temple, Tao Ancestor wrote a bull to pass the pass, and most of them rushed to him. Naturally, this old guy did not dare to discuss the Taoism with Tao Ancestor, so he hid outside the sky, and finally gave up the 15th realm. The first line of opportunity, at the same time, is virtually tantamount to giving way to the sky for the later one high. Flying Ascension Realm Sword Repair, now the nominal master of the barren world, brilliant. Firen and senior brother Chia-yun. It is the old man's direct biography, but Firen is Chia-yun's apprentice, so I have never seen this master before. The departure of the great ancestor of Tuition was actually a provocation. The biggest gift is the Fei Ran, Shou Chen, Zhou Qinggao and others who were placed high hopes by Zhou Mi Yupujing female sword repair, Lu Bai. She is wearing a fairy soldier robe named Fishtail Cave Sky. The other place is Xiao Yan and his friend Zhang Lu. 14th level sword repair Xiao Yan. She hung her legs cross-legged in the air, pulling her horn braid with her hands, as if watching a play. The great sword fairy Zhang Lu was drinking. The two sword repairers actually had a very good relationship with Aoliang in the Great Wall of Jianqi in their early years. Xiao Xing said with a straight face, "It's too bad to die in the hands of others, so I'd better be beaten to death." Zhang Lu was silent, just drinking. The drink that this great sword immortal now drank was brought by Xiao Yan from Hauran, but the variety was still far from enough, especially without the immortal family's distilled wine with the head of the Shenzhou sect in the Middle Earth. The spring breeze and the bleak autumn breeze can make you sober. But in fact, the best hangover is the mess in the world. It is too difficult to sober up if you want to be drunk. An old immortal whose 14 realms tend to be consummated, seems to have an extremely ancient Taoist name, with a great meaning, rising. The old guy is really a talent, and he would even give himself such a famous name. A Ascension Realm swordsman who condenses a world of luck, similar to Ning Girl. They are all nailed to the next 14 realms. Of course, the premise is that today's frame can survive brilliantly. Recommended, Mimi Reading App, is really good. It is worth installing. After all, you can cache books and read them offline. A 14th level sword repairer who has refined the entire Hall of Valor. What do you think Xiao Yan is looking for? Are you so angry with the old sword fairy? As a sword repairman, he walked on the left side of the 14 realms of refining heaven and earth. In fact, with Xiao Yan's aptitude, as long as he is willing to wait, there is absolutely no need for this. It's just that Xiao Yan always likes to do things with will, regardless of the world, even life and death, just for a happy one. So the more peaceful the world is, the more unhappy she is in the Great Wall of Jinqi. If Xiao Xing were not dragged by left and right, Hauran might have to lose at least one more continent, such as the northwest Lixiazu. A great sword fairy of the Great Wall of Jianqi who was a friend of the wine table. Friends belong to friends, the battlefield is a battlefield, life and death each loses. As for that little girl in the Yupu realm, just obediently watch from the wall. Lu Bai actually didn't know why he was drawn to participate in this siege, but this was the common meaning of the ancestor and Firen. However, on the battlefield today, Lu Bai didn't have the slightest fear, and her sword heart was firm. She had nothing but respect for Alien who had caused the wild world to be extremely troubled. Only someone, even if she just glances at it, she will be like a big enemy, almost to be a demon. Zhang Luhuai emptied the wine jar and said with a smile, "I have never seen Aliang's natal flying sword with his own eyes." He was drunk in partnership with Aoliang, but he failed to name the flying sword every time he drank. As long as there is a woman on the wine table, He has to step on his left foot and right foot, but he doesn't vomit again and again, and he can also say heart-wrenching words to the woman, which is called truthfulness after drinking. Xiao Yan nodded, arms crossed his chest, and sneered, I just rushed to his natal flying sword, otherwise I would not bother to come over and join in the fun. Zhang Lu asked curiously, I asked Aoliang if he could beat Dong Sanging. Aoliang only said with a hippie smile that he could not beat Dong Laoer. Xiao Sun hesitated for a moment and said, except for Chen Qingdu, no one may know how high Aoliang's kendo is. The battle is about to start, and in the formation, Shouchen reminds him in his heart, Xie and Zhuang, be careful that Aoliang is the first to kill you, staring at you from beginning to end, so you must save your life and delay the time to the greatest extent. Which type of Qi practitioners are most annoying to the cultivator? It is the battle division. The formation division in the narrow sense is similar to Han Zhou Jin, who is a branch of the earth. In the final analysis, it is still upside down the time, occupy the ground and win the harmony. In a broad sense, the formation master, every saint who sits in the small world, actually counts. For example, Chen Pingan, because of Fijians, cage in a bird, can also be considered. New Makeup nodded. Although she is the bait, she is afraid that Aoliang will get her hands too soon. If you besieged and killed ordinary Ascended Realm monks, where would there be such worries? All need to worry about the bait being eaten too quickly. The old man smiled and asked, today's Aoliang seems to be different from what you said. He is also in a situation where one person is singled out against a group, but today there are not a few grotesque things. Nodded brilliantly and said, Aoliang like this would be terrible. Aoliang, who was trapped in the encirclement, looked around and nodded, quite satisfied, it was almost the same. This battle, this pomp, is actually better than Fuyaozhou. 214 realms came, not to mention, and there are a lot of sword repairs today. It's not wasteful to shout to help out. Even on the battlefield of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, Aoliang still rarely cooperates with others to produce swords. Is also around. Aoliang from the Sub-Sage line, and the Wenqing line, is the best kind of friend, even if there is that 3-4 dispute, he still does not change. Aoliang glanced at the sky and took a deep breath. Tianhe armor-washing soldiers, most suitable for sword-making. Today's questioning the sword, you really don't need to speak your own words, anyway, the sword repairs all the truth, only on the sword. From the northernmost Jinchi Great Wall ruins in the wild world, a long line was drawn. The sword spirit is full of energy, and it has crossed the mountains and rivers of about half a barren world, and this sword light is still condensed. It is like building a long bridge of sword energy in half of the world. At the head of the city, Chao Jun was stunned, looking far away, exhausting his eyesight, but still far from seeing the end of that long line. Probably this is sword cutting the world. Chao Jun looked back until his eyes were sour, rubbed his eyes, couldn't help turning his head and asking, Wei Jin, if you are in the Ascension realm, can you do it? Of course not. Wei Jin said without hesitation, Mistress Wa's swordsmanship is already at the apex. In the future, the swordsmanship can surpass those of Mistress Wa today, only Mistress Wa who has advanced to the next level. Wei Jin suddenly said, Converge your mind, just now your swordsmanship, in fact, there is a trace of dispersion. Chao Jun was stunned for a moment, with a look of horror on his face. If it weren't for Wei Jin to remind him, he would just be unaware. Chao Jun quickly inspected Xiao Oxiandi and carefully checked his state of mind. Only then did he discover that there is a lot of green lotus in his heart. A small lot of lotus flower appeared imperceptibly, and it tilted. Chao Jun immediately sat in a jerk, and stretched it one by one. Wei Jin waited until Chao Jun returned to Daoxin, and then said aloud, Your sword training aptitude is really good. You can withdraw that ray of mind so quickly. Even if you are reminded by others, you can only watch yourself. With this flaw, Mr. Zhua is willing to teach you swordsmanship for no reason. Chao Jun smiled and said, Wei Daijiangxian, don't you know to remind you earlier? Wei Jin shook his head and said, You are not just climbing and practicing. The guardian is not to help, but to show others the way, so that you will not go astray or go astray. Chao Jun sighed, the truth is such a truth, but it sounds awkward. Wei Jin said with a smile, I am a lot older than me, and my realm is too lower than me. Of course it is awkward to come and listen to this kind of remarks. Chao Jun felt that the atmosphere of the Great Wall of Jinchi was crooked. Most of the air trainers who have come to travel here are Middle-earth Divine Continent and AI Continent, one with the highest vision, and the other with spare money. Wahongyuan traveled around the wild world, and even Chao Jun, the Yuaning sword repairman, was dumbfounded. Of course, these cheap practitioners would only be more shocked. One by one stopped on the top of the city, dumbfounded. Suddenly someone laughed. For the time being, I still can't live and die with Dao Lao, and I have to continue to break the boundary. Whether the left and right sides can enter the 14th realm and whether Lu Ji can enter the ascending realm are things worth looking forward to. Chao Jun turned his head and looked at him. He was an Earth Sage monk who came from a Taoist sect, and he was too embarrassed to say anything. The appearance of a middle-aged man, with a long scorpion robe, a long-distance travel crown on his head, a pair of white cloud shoes on his feet and a wooden sword on his back. However, this fairy-style spirit is no problem to deceive Shanxia vulgars and lower 5-level air trainers. On the side of Uncle Chao, let's save it. Chao Jun smiled and said, This Taoist, listen to your tone. Can you break the wrist with the invincible by Yujing? The Taoist chief squinted his eyes and smiled, then borrowed Chao Jiangxian's good words. Chao Jun asked in his heart at the same time, Wei Jin, shouldn't he be a pretending outsider? Wei Jin replied, You can only see that it is a monk Wei Yuanying, but you should be more careful with your words. More is worse than less. Chao Jun was relieved, half listening. Fengshua Temple Great Sword Immortal, when encountering an ascendant realm, he wouldn't miss it. Unless it is a situation, that is, Fu Lu Yushuan, Longhu Mountain Zhao Tian Lai, and the real person Ping Daifeng Fire Dragon, these few deliberately hide the atmosphere, and it happens that these old soaring, walking outside the mountain, are all in an upright style, no like to use blind eyes. You can never come across 14 realms by yourself. Can't. Chao Jun clasped his fists and said, Fortunately, we will be lucky. The middle-aged Taoist glanced at Wei Jin and Chao Jun who were sitting on both sides, and smiled and said, If the will is not strong, the will is not generous, the vulgar, and the love, how to ask for personal arrangements, it must be quite difficult to enter the room. You deserve to be a sword fairy. Wei Jin laughed off. His relationship is already well known to passers-by anyway. It doesn't need to be irritated to be broken by an unknown Taoist wandering around. Chao Jun angrily said with a smile, This Taoist commander is teaching me to practice sword. Why, the Taoist commander is also a sword repairer. What kind of sword repair I am, I don't know anything about kendo, I just watch the fire from the shore, and barely watch the excitement. The middle-aged Taoist priest smiled and shook his head, but did not continue to speak, but chose the city head between the two, gently leaped up, and sat cross-legged. No matter where, I just recognized two cheap nephews. Unfortunately, the two guys only talked about studying. They are indeed far behind Qin Pinyin. Therefore, they can only hear the meaning of the words, but even the will not be strong and the will. The term generosity comes from a letter from nephew, and I forgot. This trip to the savage wilderness, nothing serious, relax, take a look at the scenery, and then find the old deaf child who is in charge of the Sword Chi Great Wall Jail, but he hides better. There have been some deductions before, and a few traveled. I couldn't find the place by myself. There is no way, after all, it's not in the Qingming world. There are too many obstacles to the evolution of the avenue, which is really impossible. Just go to Jinsuiqing and ask Jingzhuzhong. The city lord of Baidi City, he left a message at the Middle-earth Confucian temple before, so that he could go to Jinsui City as a guest, and he was very sincere. He laughed with a heartfelt voice. Wei Daijiangxian, starved to death the courageous and timid. Since he is holding a sword book handed down from Zhong Yuan, why hasn't he still been able to obtain those ancient sword intents that linger? If I were Zhong Yuan, I would be a little disappointed with you, the boss sword immortal, who personally helped select the heir. Wei Jin said solemnly, dare to ask the predecessor's name. Wu Shuangjiang smiled and said, it's not worth mentioning, you can treat me as the uncle of the hermit. Wei Jin was at a loss. Qing Mingtiangxia. There was a burly man sitting cross-legged on a sea of clouds, drifting with the clouds all the way, after drinking wine, and throwing his hip flask casually. A young man standing beside his back with his hands behind his back, Maiziai, wearing a tiger head hat, is a bit funny. If you don't have this hat, you'll feel as if you want one person to take up the word. The man stood up, stretched his waist, stretched his muscles and bones, intertwined his fingers, twisted his body, and then inexplicably made a punch and handed it far forward. Fist shakes by Yujing. Run after hitting. The man stretched out his hand to wrap around the neck of the young man in the tiger head hat, dragging away, the young man's arms around his chest, his feet off the ground, as if lying horizontally on the ground, calm and relaxed. The only person who dared to pass the fist with Bai Yujing and treat Bai Yi like this was his best friend Lu Shirley. The wild world, above the battlefield. A battle in which it is almost impossible to distinguish who besieged whom is officially launched. After the saber was broken in his early years, Liang just kept wearing the bamboo sword, and went to the sky outside the sky under the blue sky, and confronted Dao's second child, and it was useless. Today, Liang was holding the hilt with both hands, slowly pulling the sword out of its sheath, and choosing an unprecedented gesture of holding the sword with both hands to confront the enemy. Sword repair and swords are not bound by the world and are not prisoners in the sheath. This short-stature man, a man who likes to call himself a swordsman, only holds a sword in each hand, and hasn't really made a sword yet. There are countless fierce flying swords condensed from sword intent around the world. Is like the manifestation of a magnificent avenue, the mountains and rivers of a foreign country with a radius of 3,000 miles, and thousands of flying swords. The wild great demon who participated in the siege, everyone has a share, and each needs to face a sword formation. Countless flying swords, come and go without a trace, ups and downs, crisscross, cut and kill. Liang's knees are slightly bent, arms spread out, holding double swords, and whispering, night. The mountains and rivers in the original daytime scene, if received an order, Jianxiu will change the color of the world, and in an instant, the world is dim and pitch black. Thunder, fire, rapids, comets. The magnificent sword light transformed by the four kendos suddenly lit up in the night. Thunder and lightning are intertwined, the snow is white, the flame is long, the red is like blood, the river is rolling away, the green is faint, the comet drags and cuts the sky. Like a swordsman, just because the swordsmanship is too high, it seems to be able to control four gods with the sword at the same time, which is equivalent to possessing an unreasonable natal supernatural power. Anti-kill, you're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.